The meeting's live.
Okay, we'll make a start then. Anita, yes?
Yeah. Yes, please.
Is there still only 11 members of the PCP with us?
Yes, we are trying behind the scenes to get the others linked in.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we'll make a start, and apologies to any members of the public who are listening in for the lateness. A few issues with members and also the Chief Constable getting into the webinar. My name is Joe Orson and I will be chairing the meeting today. I am joined by other panel members, Lord Bark, the Police and Crime Commissioner, Kirk Master, the Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner. We hope Simon Cole, the Chief Constable, and other officers from the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner. Kamal Adeshia, the Monitoring Officer, as well as the Committee Secretariat. This is a, do we have any apologies? I know we, Councillor Bhatia is substituted by Councillor Wesley, is that all?
That's all the official apologies, yes. Other people are still trying to join though.
Thank you very much. Just a reminder, and it's pretty obvious, but this is a virtual meeting as permitted under Section 78 of the Coronavirus Act 2020 to enable meetings to take place whilst observing social distancing measures. As such, there are certain procedures what need to be observed. When you are not speaking, please mute your microphone or move your phone away from your mouth to avoid interference. Please, can people wait to speak until invited to do so by the chair? And as always, all questions and answers are strictly given through the chair. The hand raise feature can be used to indicate a wish to speak. And if you could do that, please, because sometimes we can't get everyone on the screen. And if someone's waving their hands and you're not visually there, it's difficult for anyone who's in the chair. As it can sometimes be difficult to distinguish who is speaking in an online meeting, could I ask that each time you are invited to speak, you say your name for the benefit of persons present and for those following the meeting online. Unless you are participating by phone, please ensure that your phones are on silent and steps are taken to prevent any other kind of background interference from other devices. Members should all have a paper copy of the agenda and reports back. Please refer to the specific page number in the reports pack if you reference the report during discussion. Importantly, if you lose connection at any point, you should try to rejoin the meeting on the link or telephone number provided. The Democratic Support Officer will alert the chair if the meeting is not quorate, and I will adjourn the meeting if necessary whilst they try to help with reconnection. Item 2, Chair. Members of the panels are asked to declare any interest that they may have in the proceedings to be discussed. Do we have any?
Well, we have to sort this.
Any declarations of interest? No. Right, the minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of December 2020 have been circulated and members are asked to confirm them as an accurate record. Can you confirm, please? Are you happy it's a accurate record?
Just sort it out. We've got to sort it out.
Okay. Yeah, thumbs up, nods of yes. I'll move on. Thank you very much. Now, can I please confirm that all members of the panel have read the reports provided with the agenda? So just have a quick scan round of those on my screen, which is quite a few. I've not seen any no's. Les has, Andrew has, Alan has, Elaine. Yeah, no one's saying no. Anyway, that's important.
Sorry, Chair, I was putting my hand up to speak.
Sorry?
I was putting my hand up to respond to your question about have I read the report. Not in full, Mr. Chairman. It was way too late for me to read in full. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Les. That's throwing me a bit. Item 4, proposed precept 2021-22 and a medium-term financial plan. I turn to you, to the Police and Crime Commissioner, Lord Bark, to introduce the report. So, Lord Bark, if you could introduce item 4, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good afternoon to you and to all members of the panel. The first thing to say is I'm hoping that the Chief Constable is now online. I think it's, yes, he is. I can see him waving. Good.
I have fought with Zoom's password system. Sorry about that, Chair.
Thank you.
And it's my pleasure, Chair, to be introducing the budget for the policing of Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland in the year 2021-2022 to the panel. This is my 5th such occasion, as you will know. Last year, I thought with some confidence that it would be my final one. This year, I'm not even sure of that. Panel members will know that since becoming Police and Crime Commissioner in May 2016, and before that, actually, my main priority has been to raise the number of police officers keeping us safe in Leicestershire, so that they can once again reach the numbers that we had in 2011. This was not an outrageous priority. Not only had the numbers fallen by anything up to 25% at the worst point, the number of people, of course, who now live in our area in LLR has increased by at least 10% since 2011. And I think the census next year will show by a good deal more. So with population growth, it's perhaps important just to remind the panel that in 2006, we had 1 officer for every 430 residents. By the year 2018-19, we had 1 officer per 601 residents. By 2021, we've managed to get that down to 1 officer per 579 residents. Nowhere near the 430 figure. That's not a sacred figure. It doesn't have to be exactly that. But you can see that there are now many, many less officers than there were per head of the population. But in this enterprise, I want to thank you, Chair, and your panel for your support throughout. You have approved budgets that have made increasing the number of police officers possible, and you've been good enough to write to ministers and members of Parliament in support of our calls for a fairer funding deal. And throughout this process, I've had the support of the Chief Constable and indeed the whole force as we worked together to achieve our joint aims. Over the last 3 years, the government's calculations have been based on police and crime commissioners increasing the funding for policing via the local policing precept. For years, you will remember, that precept was limited to 1.99%. That changed about 3 years ago. That has enabled me to increase the officer numbers by about 250, a little bit less, which means that with the Uplift program that the new government set in train 2 years ago, we are now almost there. If this budget is approved, then we will reach the figure of 2317 by 31st of March 2023, just over 2 years away. I want to make one point clear, though, that on their own, the Uplift figures, the government police figures, will not restore policing to the levels of pre-austerity levels. It has needed some precept money to go into that to get near those figures. It would leave us about 250 short. However, sometimes the enthusiasm to increase numbers, it's easy to forget that mere numbers aren't sufficient in themselves. There's little point in having police officers who are not fully equipped with the technology and kit that modern policing requires. And of course, in the same way, our force has to fight crime, in particular serious crime, gang crime, organised crime, knife crime, county lines, cyber fraud, sexual violence, while still tackling burglary and vehicle crime. And we need to remind ourselves that this is crime as it manifests itself today, not as it was 50 years ago. And this requires investment in new technology and digitalization. It means that forensics have to be properly staffed and our new central property store doing the job it's intended to do. It means a sustainable capital program for the years ahead. And of course, the impact of that can be seen in the revenue budget. So as exciting as the prospect of new police officers is, I absolutely recognize the logic that these officers must have the right tools for the job. And this is reflected in this year's budget, which is a balance, a growth balance between extra police officers and extra investment in policing. I'm hopeful that we will fulfill our aim, which is to continue to be an outstanding police force, protecting the people of Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland from those who want to harm them, and in particular ensuring that the vulnerable are not marginalised or forgotten. The effectiveness of the investment to date can be seen in recent HMIC inspections, which rate the force as, and I quote, good across the board. Being an outstanding police force does involve having police officers who reflect the communities that they serve. That's why the police and the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner have agreed that we will aim to recruit not less than 1 in 4 of all new recruits, officers and staff alike, from BAME communities. In addition, we will strengthen the ties between the police and the community so that the force has a clear understanding of the whole community's hopes, needs and fears and can respond appropriately. In order to continue to deliver an exceptional police service, it's both my view and just as importantly that of the Chief Constable that we must expect the government's expectation that the policing precept will rise by the maximum amount, £15 per annum, for a Band D property this year. I don't do this or suggest this with any pleasure, but it's important and vital, I would argue, if we want to fulfill our role. I may make one thing clear, the government doesn't just allow me to do this, it actually encourages and expects me to do this. Ministers make their calculations around the financing of policing on the basis the police and crime commissioners will use their ability to precept to the maximum amount. Those figures are based on that. And indeed, I have heard the policing minister say words practically to that effect. If we don't seize this opportunity, and we don't know how long growth will last for, but if we don't seize it, then those who come after us may well have good cause to complain if our force is understaffed or under-resourced. So my request is that after a due consideration and having heard the budget outlined and attempts to answer the questions that will no doubt be asked, if you do approve the budget, I believe you'll help to ensure that the people receive a police service designed to meet their needs, designed to prevent harm, and above all, designed to keep people safe. Chair, that's what I wanted to say in presenting the budget to the panel this afternoon. And of course, who comes next is a matter for you, but I would suggest that Paul Dawkins, my Chief Financial Officer, may well be the person who could go through the budget papers with the panel, and then of course we'll be in a position hopefully to answer any queries and questions there are. Thank you for allowing me this time.
Thank you, Lord Burke. Yeah, I will invite Paul Dawkins to say a few words before we open to questions. When it does come to questions, Lord Burke, I will direct all the questions to yourself, and then you can hand them to Paul or Simon or whoever you think fit, but I will ask you, all questions will be directed to yourself.
Understood. Understood, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Paul, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Paul Dawkins, Williebox Chief Finance Officer, and today I wanted to take you through the salient points in the budget paper. I am aware the papers came to you late as a panel and apologise for that. I hope that members have had the chance to read most of the content of the papers, but I will take you, as I've said, through the main points. So the purpose of the paper, Chair, is to present the precept proposal and the budget considerations therein, and also to set out the medium-term financial plan for the 4 years ahead. And I suggest at this stage that we move past the recommendations at page 1, and we come back to those later on during the course of the meeting. I'll also move past the summary, Chair, on page 2 into page 3, and take you straight into the main body of the report. But I will point out at this stage that on page 2, paragraph 10, and in paragraph 76, there's reference to a band B, B for Bravo property. It should be band D, D for Delta, in paragraphs 10 and paragraphs 76. So moving on, Chair, to page 3, paragraph 12, what we do in the next sort of few sections of the report is just to set out the Leicestershire context. So you will see that what the paragraphs from 12 onwards set out for members is the history in relation to funding, the split between Home Office grant funding and council tax, the population growth, and also the officer numbers, which Lord Watt referred to earlier. And what we can see on chart 1 is that in terms of overall Home Office funding for 2021, that is very comparable actually to funding from 2011. It's just about £2.5 million less than the force was receiving at that point in time, 2011. But what has essentially made up for that slight reduction in funding through time, and the fact that the funding isn't where it should be for 2021 in relation to what the funding formula suggests the Commissioner should receive from Home Office. The balance of funding through time has been made up through precept increases, and you can see that the relationship between precept and grant funding has moved from 30% precept up to potentially 42% of overall funding being received through precept for next year. That's set against paragraph 17, chart 3 on page 4, a rise in the overall force area population for Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland during the last 10 years. And on page 5 at chart 4, as we've heard already, during that same period of time, there's been a reduction in overall police officer numbers from 2317 in 2010 to a low of 1,777 in 2018. And it's only in recent years, through Lord Bart's precept decisions and the panels of support, that we've been able to grow officer numbers, hopefully back to where they were pre-austerity. I'll talk more about that later as we move on through the report. But at paragraph 19, you can see there just a snapshot of some of the key demands that are placed upon the police service in Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. And that service demand is changing and continues to increase. And at paragraph 20, at the time the report was written, we identified that the cost per head of population across the force area would be approximately £189. Some further work since this paper was released has identified that the average forecast national cost per head of population for next year is £200. So we are still below the national average. Moving over the page to the settlement, so paragraph 21 on page 6, the settlement is still provisional. It should be confirmed by the end of January, which in theory has to be this week. We're yet to be notified by the Home Office of that confirmation. So the grant figures that you see in the table at paragraph 22 are still provisional at this stage. And what that table summarises for you, as well as the grant income that we're expecting to receive next year, is also the shift in preset income, assuming that that £15 increase is applied. And when we look at the figures of 77.3 million rising to 81.8 million next year, that increase of 4.5 million does take into account the uplift in preset funding plus the collection fund. Now, in previous years, the collection fund has been a surplus of around about £500,000, but due to COVID and other issues, we are expecting a deficit next year, and that effectively reduces the overall cash yield in preset for 21-22. Moving on to page 7 and the tax base at paragraph 28, just to confirm that there has been a modest rise in the Band D tax base for next year of 0.2%, which will mean that the equivalent number of Band D dwellings across the force area will be 330,081. And in terms of council tax referendum thresholds at paragraph 31, that has been set at £15. So PCCs nationally in England and Wales are allowed with their panels of support to raise preset by a maximum of £15 without triggering a referendum. Still on page 7 and moving into some of the key risks for the year ahead, which the force faces. And the force is still continuing with its police staff job evaluation scheme. This only affects staff, including PCSOs. It does not affect police officers, but that work continues, and we have a team to deliver that work for us in the months and year ahead. We've taken a view in relation to pay inflation. Members will be aware that there's a pay freeze for the police service in 21-22, but we are expecting pay inflation increases of 1.75% in 22-23, rising to 2% in the following years. There's also, again, as members will be aware, a national issue in relation to pensions generally, not just police pensions, but also the local government pension scheme, amongst others, around age discrimination. And we do have, in relation to police officers, 144 claims that may attract some degree of compensation in relation to that judgment. That's a risk to us. Work is still ongoing around that nationally, and suffice it to say, at this precise moment in time, we do not know what those costs might be, nor indeed whether any additional funding will be received either next year or in subsequent years. Still in terms of risks, emergency services network, that's the airway, voice and data communications replacement system that's used primarily by police officers, PCSOs. It's also used by fire and rescue service and the ambulance service, but that's a system that should have come into service several years ago. The project has been delayed. We are hopeful that this will come into service at the end of 2021-2, but it does come with a considerable cost. And what we've done in the budget for 21-2 is to provide a degree of revenue cost increase, as well as some investment in relation to capital, which would be primarily handsets that officers and PCSOs carry and vehicle sets. But those costs do rise potentially by a further 5.2 million in financial year 22-23. And there's no indication at this current moment in time around whether or not additional funding will be provided to meet those costs. So it is a risk, and that is something that's been built into both the medium-term revenue financial plan and also the capital programme. And the costs of that equipment and the capital charges in relation to that are built in to the medium-term financial plan. National Police Air Service is undergoing change and reform as well at the moment, and there is likely to be some reconfiguration of that, some remodelling of those charges, and again we wait to see the finer detail in relation to that. Moving on through into budget preparation, same process as in previous years, and in terms of the headlines, the force does continue, of course, to identify key risks and to take account of those risks in the budget setting process. And at paragraph 39, the budget does align both the force and the Commissioner's financial resources and risks with overall resource allocation that is contained within the medium-term financial plan, and it does link to the force's performance management regime. Moving on to page 9 and paragraph 41, the Commissioner and the Chief Constable have been through a series of discussions and formal meetings in relation to the budget preparation process and the interpretation of the settlement. And at paragraph 43, the Strategic Assurance Board, chaired by the Commissioner and attended by his senior team, the Chief Constable and the Chief Senior Team, did agree to the budget proposals on the 19th of January in relation to the budget for next financial year and the assumptions in the medium-term financial plan, including the capital programme, all of which is contained within this paper. Still on page 9, the budget for 21-22 from paragraph 44 onwards just identifies within the tables what the headlines are in terms of the figures that constitute the budget, Chair, but really the focus, I think, of the paper, and certainly the key theme that links to Lord Berkeley's opening introduction, is at paragraph 47, where members will see that the police officer growth proposed for next year is actually twofold. Firstly, we are about to enter year 2 of the government's national Uplift programme. So this is the additional 20,000 officers that the government is supporting. For this current financial year 2021, the target for Leicestershire was 89 officers of a total of 6,000 nationally. For next year, 21-22, which is year 2 of the programme, the government announced there'll be a further 6,000 officers, which for Leicestershire is 88 additional officers during 21-22. But as is mentioned again by Lord Berkeley during his opening remarks, the National Uplift Programme alone for this current year, for next year, and in terms of the third year, 22-23, where we hope to see a further 100 police officers come through, will still not restore police officer numbers to pre-austerity levels. So in order for the Commissioner to address that, both he and the Chief have agreed that a further 50 additional officers will be recruited during 21-22. And of those, into the future, 50 officers will be supported by a precept. And if conditions allow, in addition to those 50, a further 20 will be recruited during 22-23. What that will mean, before we look at the conditions in slightly more detail, is that What Lord Bot will have delivered in terms of officer uplift for 2019-20 is 107 additional officers. In 2020-21, a further 100 officers, and I can confirm that all 207 officers have been recruited. And in addition to that, a further 50 for next year. So what this will mean is that by March 2021, we'll have 2,104 full-time equivalent officers, rising to 2,242 by March 2022 and 2,342 by March 2023. So that takes into account both the increase in national uplift officers and those supported through Lord Bart's precept proposals for last financial year, this financial year, and the 2 years ahead. What we've tried to do in terms of the modelling is to be cautious around year 3 uplift in police officer numbers, and we are wary of that being confirmed first and foremost, and then the grant coming through in 22-23. So we've taken a prudent approach in terms of the modelling, and we've agreed that there does need to be a set of conditions that will determine whether those additional 20 officers above and beyond the 50 will come in 22-23. So we set those conditions out around precept being at least 4% or £10, that the uplift grant for year 3 is provided, and that there are no meaningful adverse changes in any of the assumptions, which we'll get to as we move on through the paper. And that finally, there are no further PCC approved additional demands that aren't already captured in the medium term financial plan. I would point out as well that the police pension scheme employers' contribution is forecast to increase quite significantly in 23-24 by around about 5%, which would equate to a £5 million additional cost. So for those members that have looked at Appendix 1 and seen the spike increase in police pay from 22-3 into 23-4, that is mainly being driven by that £5 million increase in the pension contribution. The proposals for next year will continue to support 200 police community support officers and approximately 1,166 support staff in a variety of roles, many of them frontline service facing. And we have agreed in recent days the position around the regional collaborations for next year and the budgets across these Midlands police force areas, of which our contribution is £9.5 million. In terms of non-pay, we've captured all of those costs, and one of the key drivers is in relation to IT, where additional investment is sought, but that investment does come at a cost, and where we purchase hardware that's funded through capital, that will increase the borrowing for the force in the years ahead. So the revenue impact of that does increase by 1.2 million in 21-22 to a total of £4 million. Moving on to the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, you'll see at paragraph 48 that costs have increased by £70,000 next year compared to this year, 2021, but £20,000 of that increase is in relation to external audit charges. That's a national issue. It's not just purely an issue for Leicestershire, but it has increased the overall cost of the non-pay costs for the OPCC in the year ahead. And I would also point out that at paragraph 50, you can see the breakdown of the budget there, and that 51, to confirm also that a variety of other activities have been taken on by the OPCC during Lord Bart's term, and that is in addition to what used to be undertaken by the OPCC 3 to 4 years ago. So a lot's changed effectively, and the demand has increased in terms of the service requirement around the OPCC. Moving on to commissioning at paragraph 52 onwards, you can see what the planned spend is at paragraph 53, and at paragraph 57 across the page on page 13, you'll see some good news in relation to the additional grants that the commissioning team has managed to attract for financial year 2021, which is £2 million more than those that were secured during 2019-20. However, uncertainty still remains around the continuation of some of those grants into 2021. So in the paper, you'll see we've only included £109,000 in terms of known funding commitments next year around ISVA funding. So there's a question mark and therefore a risk associated with the continuation of some of the funding streams that have been secured for this year. Moving on to investments, £4.5 million worth of investments are planned. I've talked about police pay already at 58A, but there are further investments in relation to IT, the property store, ANPR, and some of the residual infrastructure costs as well to support the increase in officer numbers. Moving on to page 14 and paragraph 59, the efficiency savings target of £500,000 has been set for next year, but due to service pressures in relation to COVID and policing, the Christmas period and so on, at this moment in time, those plans have not been fully developed, but they will be in the coming weeks and in preparation for the commencement of the new financial year from the 1st of April. And I'm sure we'll be in a position to share the detail of that with members in the weeks ahead. The capital strategy I've touched on, but the detail around that is contained within Appendix 2, where you can see the planned investments for estates, IT, vehicle fleet, which total around £8.5 million. And the way in which we fund those investments that links to the Treasury management strategy is set out for you at Appendix 3. And both the capital strategy and the Treasury strategies were again approved by the Strategic Assurance Board in January. Moving on to the medium-term financial plan, I won't go through all of the detail there, but I would draw your attention to the fact that whilst we're trying to plan for 4 years ahead, so 21-22 onwards, we are of course only in receipt of a 1-year settlement. So whilst we're able to accurately forecast our expenditure for the years ahead based on the assumptions within this paper, those assumptions themselves may change through time, particularly in relation to inflation, but also of course we've only got certainty around next year's Home Office grant funding, and indeed the precept increases that future PCCs might be asked to support. So there are a lot of unknowns in relation to the medium-term financial plan. But I would, at paragraph 68, just draw your attention to the fact that next year, should the budget be approved today, the Commissioner will be allocating approximately 97.3% of the net revenue budget to the Chief and the force to support operational policing in the year ahead. At paragraph 69 on page 15, Chair, I won't go through all of those assumptions. They're there mainly for information, but I would just point out that at C, we are assuming that there'll be no increase or decrease in core government grant funding moving forward, with the exception of the National Uplift Officer Programme, where we do hope year 3 will be delivered in 22-23, and the grant in relation to that will come through. And at D, whilst we're aware that there is the potential to increase Band D precept by £15 next year, the prevailing view nationally and locally across the East Mids region is that we should be modelling only a 2% increase, which is around £5 for the years after 21-22. Moving on then to page 16, at the top of page 16, you'll see the table there, the potential funding gaps for the years ahead before the use of reserves. But from paragraph 71 onwards on page 16, members can see how we plan to use reserves over the life of the medium-term financial plan. And I draw your attention to paragraph 73A on page 17, the general reserve, where Lord Back has determined that we should reduce that from the current value of £5 million to 4.25 million for the year ahead, transfer that £750,000 into the budget equalisation reserve to support the medium-term financial plan. That would still mean that the general reserve is within the guidance amounts and percentages that are set by Home Office and Treasury, but we will be at the lower end of that, 4.25 million or 2% of net revenue spend. The budget equalisation reserve is shown at B, and we do intend to fully utilise that reserve by financial year 23-24. And at C, the earmark reserves, or the main earmark reserves, are there for information. And over the page is a breakdown of how we intend to use some of those reserves next financial year. So that takes us to page 18, paragraph 75 onwards, Chair, and the Commissioner's precept proposal for next year, which, as you heard Lord Bork already mention, he intends, with your agreement, to raise precept by the maximum, or £15 next year for a Band D property. And as part of that process, we have gone through quite an extensive consultation exercise where we engaged a third-party research company to assist us, who ran a series of focus groups and also pulse surveys to effectively share the precept proposals and the the medium-term financial plan risks and issues with those that participated, to seek their views around that and to seek whether or not there was support for the £15 Band D increase. And happy to report that the findings were indeed that £15 increase was supported by those focus groups and pulse surveys. And just really to reiterate the point at paragraph 77, the Commissioner was extremely grateful to those that took part, not only in the focus groups, but also in the pulse surveys as well. So we're closing towards the end of the paper now, Chair. There is a statement by the Chief Constable, Simon Cole, which with your agreement, I'm sure Simon would like to refer to. And there is my Chief Finance Officer statement towards the end of the paper. And I'll conclude, Chair, by stating that the budget has been prepared on a robust and prudent basis. It does include a number of investments, with the primary investment being in police officers in the year ahead, but it is in line with the Commissioner's police and crime plan priorities. And finally, Chair, the budget does include the appropriate use of reserves, and the remaining reserves, in my view, will be held at adequate and sufficient levels. So that really concludes the presentation, Chair. Been through some detail there for you. Hopefully, for those members who have not had a chance to read all of the detail within the papers, that has assisted with their understanding of the main themes, the key issues, and provided that overview of the medium-term financial plan. So I'll hand back to you, Chair, and of course, happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Just before we totally lose you, anything you'd like to highlight in any of the three appendix at all?
Thanks, Chair. Just really an appendix 1 for members. That is the medium-term financial plan, so it does break down the detail in relation to that. It also includes what the Band D precept would be for Band A dwellings through to Band H. The strategies, I wasn't planning on going through any detail, Chair, unless the members have specific questions. It's mainly there for your information at this stage. So I'll hand back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. And also thank you for putting it, talking us through in a fairly easy way for me to follow, at least, and I'm sure most of the other members too as well. So thank you for that, Paul.
Chair, I wonder if I could just invite you, it's completely a matter for you and the panel, of course, to ask the Chief Constable whether he wanted to say a few words in support, as it were, at this stage. I know he's on the call.
Yeah, I was going to invite Simon, obviously, later on when it came to his statement, but obviously, if Simon would like to have a word now, I'm sure that's okay with the panel.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can see you as well.
I wouldn't wish that on anyone, Chair. I mean, I guess the first thing in terms of the panel's role holding the PCC to account, the first part of paragraph 78 from me is that the budget has, in my view, been put together properly and in accordance with the policing protocol order and all of those things that it has to do. And we have to have regard to the policing crime plan. We have to have regard to the strategic policing requirement. As ever with any budget. Oh, sorry, there's somebody saying they want to speak, Chair. There's a comment in the comments page. Do you want me to put...
It's Councillor Lee from Charnwood saying she can't raise her hand.
Joe, thank you. I'm happy to speak, please, Chair, after Simon's presented. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, you know, budget setting is ever important because it's public money. Important as the PCC's alluded to, if he ever manages to escape the role, whoever succeeds him is likely to inherit whatever is decided by the panel this year. You can see, I'm not going to read out what I've said. I'm sure that the panel have had the chance to at least cast their eye across it. I just highlight some bits really. So yes, I do support, after some reflection, £15. I think there are some familiar themes here for the panel, population growth, you know, kind of recovering bluntly from the past pressures of austerity. We are not funded the same police forces, and we are not one of the best funded forces. So as the paper alludes to earlier on, we're funded below the national average. And I think the other thing which the panel, I'm sure, want to think about is this sort of push towards funding local policing through local funding. So this kind of split of funding, which you can see from the paper, has pushed away from central government financing to the precept being a hugely important part of what we're dealing with. And just as an example, I was talking to a force last week. They're 81% centrally funded. And so you can see there the difference there. I think it must be said that the thrust of the announcements about the budget reflect what the PCC said earlier, which is, you know, central government's announcements have made the assumption, rightly or wrongly, that PCCs will go for what they call full flexibility. And the preset limits, those of us who've lived through several of these panels and police authorities and every kind of governance that there's been, will know that at various levels, the threshold has been set at different levels across the year. We've seen 0%, 2%, and this year the maximum is 15%. So it does sort of feel that the national conversation has made an assumption about a local decision that actually sits with this panel. As I say in my report, this is the 11th occasion I've presented a budget. I think it's the second one that's actually had some growth in central government funding, although I think you could have a technical argument about capital freeze grant that Paul Dawkins would probably enjoy too much and could probably scrape it to agree 3. You know, for me, I did want to just put in front of the panel the fact that this budget looks different to how we expected it because of the pay freeze. And I would just want to note that the officers and staff have worked very hard this year and worked very hard through the pandemic in particular. The pay freeze does not do them any favours, but it helps our budget management because clearly we're not funding a pay increase. Paul Dawkins has already made the point, Chair, just around reserves, but you can see in and around paragraph 70 that our reserves are dwindling. And in effect, what we're doing, and I think it's the right thing to do, and I've been involved in recommending it to this panel in the past, you know, we're using reserves to try and maximise the amount of operational policing hours that we have to deliver service to the 1.1 million people that we serve. And I say it every year because it makes me feel better. It doesn't change anything, but it would be better for everybody if we had multi-year budget settlements, because having a one-year budget settlement does make it very tricky to predict even 2 years hence, and it just makes it difficult. Paul Dawkins and Lord Back have both alluded to the sort of peaks and troughs that we've experienced across the last decade. You know, at our lowest point, we lost over 800,000 deployable hours a year, operational hours, because in effect, when you buy policing, which is what we're talking about this money doing, it buys you a capacity to deliver, and that might be dealing with offenders, it might be visible patrol, it might be dealing with cybercrime, whatever it is. But obviously, as Lord Back has alluded to, and the paper describes, this is about a kind of building back of capacity, although relative to the growth of the population, we're probably not going to achieve the same levels of resourcing that we saw. And I use 2010 as the example because it's the year I walked in the door. We have, in March, we moved to the target operating model. We moved to it on the 11th of March. That means at local police stations, you have got more officers based there, you've got more investigators and detectives based there. And my gut reaction, and I've said this to this panel before, is my gut reaction, it's worked. Our response times seem to be improving. We seem to be getting more positive outcomes. It's very hard to say because COVID has changed so much across the year in terms of our volumes. And for instance, COVID has added some 21,000 calls to us that just wouldn't, just didn't exist this time last year. And when we were talking about the budget last year, I don't think we would have even considered. So I think this budget can make a really positive difference. In the middle of page 20 there's just some headline figures. But, just to spell that out, we get a 999 call every 4 minutes. We get a 101 non-emergency call every 90 seconds. So we are a service that is in constant demand, and it still remains the case that I've never been to a public meeting or a public Zoom call where somebody said, Simon, I want less policing. So there is a constant sort of customer community desire for more policing all of the time. The other thing, and Lord Back has alluded to it, is just around the nature of what we're dealing with. And the nature of what we're dealing with changes, and we need to change with that. And I've made the point in the paper that I'm sure, here we all are talking on technology. We've probably got mobile phones going. We might be running an iPad so we can fact check anything at the same time. All of that means that pretty much everything we deal with has got a digital footprint. And as an exemplar of that, you might have seen this week the details. We've been dealing with a cyber attack on Welland Park Academy. I can't go into too much detail because there's a person being arrested, but in effect they're a local school in one of our market towns, in effect, attacked by a cyber attack, dealt with by expertise provided by the centre of the force supporting the local area. And I use that because it's kind of typical of what we're seeing. And pretty much everything we deal with now has some sort of digital footprint. And then the last couple of paragraphs, Chair, if I can, we cover a broad spectrum. We've talked before in these panels in the past about terrorism. We're blessed at the moment actually by support around the Violence Reduction Network, which seems to me a good thing as a long-term preventative piece of work, which sits within the OPCC. And so, and then I guess what you're interested in is, well, if we were to spend this money, what do we get? Well, I think the kind of things that and they're alluded to within the paper at paragraph 47. So we will put more investigators to our neighbourhood teams. We will put more people into our neighbourhood teams. We've got some specific things. We've got 4 school liaison posts that are only funded until the end of March. So we would like to keep funding those. We'd like to introduce 9, so 1 for each neighbourhood, in effect, youth and school engagement people. We'd like to create a rural crime team, headed up initially by a sergeant with a couple of constables to augment the work already. We've got a bit of a rural team in the northwest. We've got a lot of work going on around Op Galileo across in the east. So we think we need to augment our response to the rural and build on some of the stuff that, for instance, the heritage crime team do. I'm afraid we need to put a couple more people into our missing from home work. You know, if today's a typical day, we'll find about 14 missing people, and we think that we need to get upstream of that. Because we've got so many people joining us, which is good news. You know, this is a really good issue to have. We need to increase the staffing by, I think, 2 or 3 posts of the team that have to support them. So officers who join have to meet national standards, and we have to assess that. Sadly, we still see road collisions as being an issue. We think we need to put a couple more detectives in to investigate that. We noticed that a big prison is being built. I can almost see it from where I'm sat now talking to you. We think that means we need to increase our prison intelligence capacity. We need to put a couple more people into non-recent investigations because of the volume of them, which is something that Councillor Taylor has asked us about in the past. We need to increase our management of sex offenders because there's a national ratio of how many officers, how many cases each officer should have, and we need to put another, I think, officer into there. I think we need to increase how we deal with fraud as well, and also around violent and complex crime. So there's a set of things that are real things that would make a real difference in local communities, because in effect, what this proposal is to help us to keep regaining the ground that this panel has helped us regain in the past, supported by the PCC as well. So in closing, Chair, if I can, I mean, I think the key thing that the panel needs to know from me is I think the budget's been put together in accordance with the legal framework. And so you can be reassured on that. From my point of view, it has. I do support the £15 because I think it means that we can deliver more policing to local communities, and that seems to me to be what they ask for. And then for the future, it will enable us to make sure we're getting nearer to being as diverse as the places we police, because we have how we choose to recruit. It enables us to keep ahead of the digital. And also, we know we're moving into a world where there is a national performance framework, which will be set by the government. It's not entirely clear, or as I understand it, agreed exactly what will be in that. But within that, at the moment, we will be, in effect, being compared to forces who have a better relative level of resource than us. So anything we can do to make up that gap as we go into that national performance framework would be important to me. Chair, I'll rest there. The budget has my support. I do realise that it's an ask, but it's an ask which is about trying to make sure that we're resourced to give a good service to local people and keep giving that good service. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Simon. Lord Bart, would you like to wind up the presentation from the OPCC?
I'll just, if I may, and nothing more for me to say. I think the last 2 speakers spoke very much for themselves, and I'm delighted to have the support working with the Chief Constable, and I hope the panel will listen very carefully to, as they always do, to what Simon Cole has said. Instead of me winding up, and I imagine the panel are fed up with hearing my voice, why don't I ask my deputy, if I may, Councillor Kirkmaster, just to sum up really what we're trying to say. Is that okay with you, Chair? I think that might be of interest to the panel.
Okay, over to you, Kurt, then we'll go into questioning. You're on mute, Kurt.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
1 second, Joe, sorry. Is that okay now?
Yep.
Hello?
Hi.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, thank you for that, and thank you, Chair. I think given all the conversation that we've had about this, and this will be no surprise to anybody on the panel, I think the important point to make about this, and one that I really want to draw out, one of the roles that Willie has been absolutely committed to throughout his term, along with increasing police numbers and the police and crime plan, is his engagement with the communities, with the voluntary organisations, with the individuals and constituents that represent all of our wards across Leicester and Rutland. And I think one of the pressing things that's always come to the fore, and Simon made reference to it as well in regards to he's never been in a meeting or a public meeting where anybody has said they don't want more police officers. And, you know, I have to echo that point in all of our conversations, in all of the official and unofficial dialogues that we have with a range of different communities across the whole of LLR, echo that point constantly. And I don't believe that having hundreds and hundreds and thousands of police officers on the front line is the answer to all policing, because operationally Simon will tell you that it's not. And there's a range of other skills and other factors that policing need, with the changes in crime, the changing of the demographics of the cities and counties that we represent. But it is very, very important, the perception of policing and people feeling that they have contact and can have contact with their neighbourhood police teams. They get to know officers and the PCSOs that represent their communities and which they live in is a very, very important point. And it's been a difficult one. I mean, we've been tossing around with this budget now for a couple of weeks, going backwards and forwards between both teams, with Simon's team and our team, Willie and Simon having their discussions about the best way forward. And I think we've absolutely come to a real, I think, a compromise in the budget that serves the communities of Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland, will serve policing going forward. And more importantly, it delivers. It delivers for the people, and it delivers for the people that we represent. There's a range of different things in here, from investments to capital to IT, to making sure the police are equipped to do their job, as well as the physical number of increasing police numbers. And I think it's a good way forward. We've left some room in there for options of going forward. You know, if things change, we don't know what the funding formulas will look like going forward in years to come. We don't know what the precept conversation will look like in years to come. And we hope all of those will improve for the betterment and put us on a national footing with some other forces across the country. So there's still a lot of unknowns, but I think where we are today with our 1 year settlement, I think we're in a really good place, and this is a well thought out budget. Paul Dawkins is a very prudent finance officer, and you know, he tells us when we're rowing too far. So I think I fully support the budget, as you'd expect me to say, but I think it's very balanced and very fair, and reflects what the communities and the people of Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland have been telling this office and the police for a while. Thank you, Chair.
You're muted, Joe.
My fault. My apologies. Tell everyone off and then make the same mistake myself. But apologies. Anita, before we go into questions, can I ask if all members are present now, please? I can certainly see Nisha and Kevin have joined us, so welcome both of you too.
Yeah, my apologies, Chair.
Oh, no problem, Kevin. You're here now for the meet. Anita? She'll come back to us, I'm sure.
Sorry, Chair. Yes, I'm also on mute at the time. Everyone is present, and that includes the substitute for Councillor Ray Battiar.
Thank you very much, Anita. Okay, we're moving into any questions. I noticed one or two things on the chat popping up. I certainly saw Alan, are we going to take things by section by section? The answer is yes to that, but I'm also well aware Nisha, for example, has put a comment up. She's got a general observation. I have 3 people indicating they want to speak at this moment. We certainly know Nisha wants to make a general observation. Deborah, your hand is up first. Is it just general?
General questions as well, yeah, not specifically to any section.
Okay, we'll take you first then, Deborah. Then please, as your first hand up, and then if you could take your hand down, please. Otherwise, I'll get confused. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say thank you to everyone that's presented, especially to Paul. It was really clear and concise and really good indications where you were. So really did appreciate that. Couple of questions for me, probably 3 questions. I did raise the issue of section 106 payments, that I don't see anything within that the budget at all about where there's been receipts for either revenue or capital from Section 106, and the response has come back that there's been no Section 106 drawn back from any local planning authority for the whole of 2020-21. I'm really struggling to understand how that's even possible, because I've seen Section 106 for my particular area that has funding for the police, for extra police officers, for radios, for capital, and I'm just really struggling to understand why no incomes come from all those developments that we've had across LLR in the year 2020 to 21, and obviously going forward. So I'll be interested to see why that is. My other point is really about efficiency saving. There's a very small paragraph in there about efficiency savings with just a notable amount in there, but no evidence about where that's going to come from. I would have thought with all the work that's gone into producing this, some time would have been spent going into those efficiency savings and where they're going to come from. And I think in this particular time that we're in, with all that's going on and local authorities, everyone else having to find efficiencies and to work smarter, I would have thought there'd be a lot more detail in there about efficiency savings. So I'm not really seeing much efficiency savings that is either going on within that budget. And the survey results, really struggling to understand, because it's such a small amount of people that have been spoken to out of the whole of the LLR population, that I can't really put any weight at all to the results of the survey. And just my final point, really, for me, there's not enough evidence within these papers to say why those additional officers are needed. There's no crime stats. There's nothing in there that's given me any evidence to say why we would need those officers. I'm not saying that we don't, but I'm not being presented with any evidence that why they're needed and what they're going to be used for. So for me, it's a really difficult paper to understand, to read and get where that evidence is coming from, and it's not clear to me within these papers. And due to the lateness of them, I've not had time to study them as well. And if they were shared for the survey to all those people, the 150 people that have taken part in the survey, I would have thought we could have had a draft copy of these, a few months ago for us just to mull over a little bit, because it's really not fair to us as a panel to ask us to make this decision with such high amount of a raise within this pandemic, where households are really struggling to pay their bills. People have been furloughed, people have lost their jobs. They've got no future prospects. To ask us to approve that with very limited time to study this, I think it's not really fair to us. And I'll end there. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, could just remind questioners, please, at this stage, you did say, could we have general observations? Quite a few of those questions, not all, could have been dealt with in the sections. But I'll take them just at this moment in time, Deborah, just a reminder to the other ones who are indicating they've got general observation matters. It's far more efficient to go through section by section. Lord Bark, who would you like those questions to be answered by? You're on mute, Willie.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll ask Paul Dawkins to answer the 106, Section 106 questions and the effective and the efficiency savings question. Sorry. I think if you want any proof that the police are busy, you can hear it now from just outside my window. As for the survey results, I'll ask Paul Heinsohn to say a word or two about that. These are focus groups that are particularly and specially organised by companies that do this. I mean, this is how it works. But Paul will explain much better than I can on that. And I'm surprised, I have to say, a little bit by what Deborah says about the case not being made for extra officers. I mean, I would have thought that everything that had been said, particularly by the Chief Constable, made it clear that Leicestershire needed more officers, the increased population, the new type of crime, the fact of COVID, and how busy they are. But it's a point well made by Councillor Taylor, but I don't think it's a fair one. I have to say that last one. So I'll ask Paul Dawkins first, please, Chair, with your permission, to deal with the 106 and the efficiency savings.
Okay, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's fair to say that Section 106 has been a challenge for both the force and the OPCC in recent years. We do have a number of approved claims. The difficulty is in being able to draw the money down from local planning authorities. What do I mean by that? Well, for this current financial year, 2021, so far we've received just in excess of £70,000 paid to the force, but we are in a place where the processes that are used by local authorities across the force area vary. So some local authorities will insist on the force spending the money, then producing invoices and the receipts for that spend before we're releasing funds. Others are happy to release those funds ahead of that spend. Where we are at the moment, today, in fact, is still trying to evidence to local planners' satisfaction the spends that we've incurred this year, which are around about £150,000. So we're still seeking to draw down the balance of that funding for this financial year. With regard to future funding, which is at the heart of the question, why isn't that reflected in the capital programme in the medium-term financial plan? The simple answer is because of the uncertainty. So we're not quite sure whether housing thresholds will be met, which sort of triggers the release of 106 funds. And even if it does, then we're into that process again of evidencing spend to the satisfaction of planners. So it is a challenge for us, and certainly whilst the situation has improved compared to recent years, and the relationships are strong between the force and the respective local authorities, it is still an arduous process. So there's no planned use of 106 funding for next year as things stand, but we are always seeking to draw down those funds where we sensibly can, Chair. Moving on to the efficiency plan, I touched on this during my introduction, and the Chief Constable may want to add to this, but when this emerged through the budget discussions, due to the demands of policing, the pandemic, the festive period, New Year's Eve, and so on, and even some of the mutual aid requests that came into force from other force areas around Brexit and the like, that has been a drain on the senior leadership team, and that together with inevitable leave during the Christmas period has meant that those individuals that we needed to bring together to start to put that detailed plan together for us, that's not been possible at this stage. I did also say in the introduction that the intention over the coming weeks is to develop that plan. We will formally take that to the Strategic Assurance Board for the Commissioner to scrutinise in the first instance, and then I'm sure when the PCC and the Chief are happy for that to be released into the public domain, we will do that, and of course we'll share that with panel members, and we hope to conclude that before the commencement of the new financial year, Chair. So if I pause there, does that answer the questions for you?
Willie, are you happy? Would you like to add anything to those before we go on to Paul Heinsohn?
I mean, I think I can say this without breaking any kind of confidences, that the question asked about the efficiency savings that have been asked by the panel, both before this meeting and at it, are also questions that have been asked by others too. So I absolutely understand why the question's being asked, but I'm satisfied that there'll be a response to that in terms of where those savings are going to be in short order, and that's what I will expect. But apart from that, no, nothing else I want to say in relation to that. It may be, as Paul suggested, the Chief might want to say a word about that, or he may not. As for the survey results, I was going to ask Paul Heinsohn, my Chief Exec, to say a word or two about the focus group and why we went for that this year rather than anything else.
Okay, let's take Simon. Do you want to come in, and then we can move on to the focus groups following that?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, we got the budget settlement letter from the government on the 17th of December, so that was a bit late. I take the point. I sort of take it on the chin. I'd be happier sat here with a developed plan. We will develop a plan. I mean, within the papers, we've found ways of saving £38 million across the last few years. So I have little doubt we'll be able to identify some further efficiencies. I think, rather so we're not talking in code. The PCC has asked of me that we produce an efficiency plan, and we will produce an efficiency plan. There's a little bit of me, going actually to something that Councillor Taylor said, which I just want to make the point. We try and do everything efficiently and smarter. And by doing that, we can move investment from inefficient areas into efficient areas. And so that's what we're trying to do all the time. The PCC would like that codified in an efficiency savings plan, and that will be done. And, really happy when it's done, that it's shared with the panel. And then just, the point about performance. I mean, I think the panel had a performance paper at its last meeting. We're happy to supply. I mean, there's some sort of hints of performance data. Ballpark, we're looking at 95,000 reported crimes to deal with. The numbers of 999 calls and 101 calls and the like are within my paper as well, which may help the panel.
Thank you. Paul, on to you on focus groups, please.
Yeah, well, hopefully you can see me and hopefully hear me. I'm speaking through Willie's laptop, so that's why I'm on mute but speaking. So can I just check you can actually hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, good question. It's a departure for us. The rationale for it was this. We've used the survey, the previous survey, well, since I've been here a couple of times. First time we got nearly 2,000, if memory serves me correctly. Second time we struggled to get to 1,000. The numbers were dwindling. It wasn't independent. We wanted something that basically was independent, that was robust, that had a sound methodology. And that's why we went for it. It's something that's been used by a number of OPCCs across the country. We've checked with them, particularly Nottingham, who've used it. We met with the company, tested out their methodology. It's also kind of non-binary. The previous survey was just a kind of yes/no answer. This gives us an awful lot more information. It allows us to test it out more fully. The numbers aren't that different. So, I mean, Deborah says numbers are very low. Well, yeah, of course they're always low. I mean, you don't get massive numbers respond to this, and also you don't get proportionate numbers. We've always been a bit low on Leicester numbers previously. This gives it a very even proportionate split, and the numbers aren't. I mean, when you take it all into account, 150 pulse surveys, around about 30 in the focus groups, follow-up phone calls. I mean, they're not massive numbers, I accept, but the methodology is exactly the same as, the likes of Ipsos Mori and so on would use. We just haven't got the money to pay for Ipsos Mori. But this is a very renowned, very well-established company. You can look into their credentials. They've run it independently. They've done it very responsibly. Just to be clear, we didn't set foot in any of the focus groups. We never spoke. We never uttered a sound. We just got their results. So it's a completely independent survey. You've got all the details about the methodology in there. You can see sort of the approach they adopted. I mean, the other thing I'd say is, though, that this isn't the only form of conversation we have with the community. We've built on the surveys that we've done throughout the year. They don't exactly ask the same questions. But they are very, very similar territory. So if you look at the number of people that the police have got on neighbourhood alert, it is thousands and thousands of people. And we've run several different surveys throughout the year and a recent CSP survey that comes up with very similar results. I mean, we could summarise those for you and send them round, but they don't ask exactly the same questions, I accept that, but they are very, very similar themes and very, very broad support. This is exactly the same way as I say that other OPCCs have been going. So I'll stop there.
Okay, I've been doing my best to have a bit of discipline here with going section by section, and of course that just didn't work right from the word go. Alan, I'm well aware you want to come in on focus groups.
Excuse me, Chair. Sorry, Chair. I've had my hands up for absolutely ages.
Yeah, I know, but Alan, one moment, Lee. It's just that Alan wants to come in on focus groups only. Otherwise, we're going to be all over the shop. This is why originally I wanted to go section by section, because it just becomes impossible to manage. Nisha's also made a comment about focus groups. You know, if we'd have kept it section by section from the first speaker, it would have been far easier. But I was told it's general observation, but no, it didn't work like that. Alan and then Nisha on focus groups only, Nisha.
Sorry, it's not focus groups. Mine's a general comment. So
comment. Yeah, all over the place, you see. Alan, and then we'll get back to general observation, general comments, Nisha, and then, okay, Alan, on focus groups only, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I thought it might be a difficult meeting to chair, so yeah, well played so far. On the focus groups, I think it's absolutely clear that looking at the number of people that were spoken to, it is statistically irrelevant and we should pay no attention to it. That is just a simple matter of statistics. It's 40 years since I did it as operations research at university, but I can tell you it is insignificant and we should pay no attention to it. But more worryingly, Chairman, I saw nothing in the wording that told the participants about the £7 million of extra funding that Leicestershire Police were going to get. And looking at paragraph 15 on page 3, I notice no one has added together the two coloured bars. If you add them together, the total absolute amount of funding for Leicestershire Police, if this goes ahead, is 18% higher than it was in 2011. What I did see in the questions that were asked was the comment given to people before they came back with the reply was that the Police and Crime Commissioner views this as, and I quote, essential. Now, given that they weren't told about the 7 million, they weren't told about the total increase in funding over 10 years ago, and that there were so few people involved, and that they were told up front that this was, I quote, essential, I have to say we have to ignore that survey completely. I've done my own. 18 out of 27 councillors have responded to my question on my authority. All 18 have said no. I've done an online survey. Not one single person supports this 6%. I think it's been done in a dark room with a couple of people, and they're completely out of touch with reality and the pressures that the public are facing. And I'm really surprised, given the history of Lord Bach and how involved he is and how much he cares. So don't take it personally, Lord Bach, but I just don't think you've got this one right.
Thank you very much. Lord Barker, would you like your Chief Executive to answer a bit on focus groups?
Yes, I think I'll just say a word first, if I may. I look forward to seeing what Rutland County Council, of which you are a member, Alan, do when they come to do their own budget and their own precept. We'll see whether they go to the maximum or not. That time will tell. Time will tell there. And what? Oh, am I? And what arguments are put forward if they do? You're very unfair indeed about the focus groups, as Paul Hanson will now, I think, explain. These small numbers of who were actually the part of the focus groups weren't random people just taken out of the street. These were people who had to fulfill various qualities in order to be part of that focus group. The 150 was random, of course it was. I think your criticisms are deeply unfair, but you're absolutely, of course, entitled to make them. And to sort of link the 7 million figure, the broad figure of 7 million, I get to ask Paul Dawkins to respond to that. But the 7 million figure, you can't just compare the 7 million figure in the way that you have. And I think you know that as you say it. To Paul Hanson.
Yeah, in terms of representative nature of it, I mean, that was partly the reason for doing it, Alan. We felt that the numbers we had in the previous year were not representative of the whole community. So comparing it to the way in which we've done the previous survey, what we have here is a robust methodology and a methodology that has a balanced demography. We get people from different demographic groups, different ethnic groups, different geographic groups, and we can balance that. And it's chosen independently. When we do the survey, launch the online survey, we have absolutely no idea who answers it. It's possible that people could be putting all sorts of things in. We have no control over it. We have no way of knowing, who's completed what, or even sometimes how many times they've completed. This is a much, much more honest way of doing it. You can see the numbers there. In terms of the kind of 7 million, we provided them with a range of different bits of information, a survey company, for them to prepare what they thought was the right script. So they've prepared the script, not us. They chose that in the way that they felt was most informative. What they wanted to do was obviously give people information, but not go into enormous detail. The 7 million, obviously, it doesn't refer to it in the script. You've got the script. But what it does do is tell you exactly how many police officers would be recruited, what the numbers were, what the scale of increase are, which does, let me just emphasize, really does include that 7 million. So there's no hiding anything away at all there. They wouldn't have done it, if I'm honest, they wouldn't have done it if they'd felt that. They were very, very clear about, this has to be an independently managed process. And that's the way they conducted it, and we fitted in with that entirely. On your bit about the, I can't remember exactly what you said about the 18%. I can't remember the figures you gave, but I think it's probably better if Paul answers that, Alan. The bit about, on page 15, was it? If you added it together, it comes to more. I don't know if I can answer that one. So if it's okay with you, Chair, I'll ask Paul to,
yes, please.
to respond to that.
Well, the Chair's Joe.
Okay, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean the two pertinent sections of the report are paragraphs 14 and paragraphs 22. So at 14, I mean, we're all aware that across the public sector, austerity, which really started to bite around the back end of 2009-10 into 2010-11, that did result through to 2018-19 of a real terms reduction in grant to the value of 30%. And what's happened over the last few years, of course, is Home Office grant was reducing, then it was held at flat cash. For all intents and purposes, next year the grant is still flat cash. The only increase in grant is in relation to year 2 of the National Police Officer Uplift programme, and the costs associated with bringing in a new police officer, so their salary, their training, their equipment, and so on, will consume all of that additional grant funding. So there's no national grant funding left over within that additionality to meet non-pay price inflation, for example, to meet the ongoing costs of last year's September 2020 pay award increase for police officers and staff. So we've had to effectively look to support the ongoing costs of the organisation through precept increases, in the knowledge that grant increases are not there to meet those costs. In terms of the total available funding, well, yes, it's true to say that has increased in overall terms. When, as I'm saying, we have the two figures together, but when you look at the effects of inflation, pay and price inflation, and the fact that the organisation force has grown during that period as we try to come out of austerity, increase police officer numbers in the last 2 or 3 years, we have effectively still been in a position where those additional costs have been funded almost wholly through precept and not through grant, for the reasons that I've explained. So I think that probably deals with the effect of grant funding, what the increase is going towards, which is an increase in national police officer numbers that will benefit from locally in Leicestershire, and the fact that inflation for the last several years has not been catered for by any additional grant. It's had to be funded through precept, Chair. So I'll pause there and hand back to you.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, going back to now to just general comments before we go into section. Although the order does say Maronisa first, I'm going to take Lee because I'm well aware she was trying to get a hand up but just couldn't find a function. So Lee, then Maronisa.
Thank you. So just as Councillor Lee Harper-Davies, Charnwood lead member for support and communities. I am the newest member to this group, and it's been a very steep learning curve for me. But I think budget setting is just the hardest task to do. I really commend this report. If only all of the reports that we have to sit through, and I don't think since I joined this as lead member for my area in my portfolio, I've never had to sit through so many meetings and so many reports. I think this report is absolutely excellent, referred to by paragraph and by page. It's easy to follow, so I really commend the work that you put into this report. Thank you very much indeed. I was going to ask a question to Simon regarding recruitment, and I know for myself, because on December the 22nd, again in my new role, I went out COVID safe with one of our officers in Charnwood. Originally we sat there at 7:30 for our briefing. There were 15 officers in that room, a mix of sergeant, across the board, PCSOs inclusive. By the time we went out on the beat, we were left with 3 in the room. By the time the different departments sought several of the officers in that room to help them with their inquiries, we were down to really small numbers. So I don't believe there's any doubt we need extra officers on the beat. The last one I was going to ask was Simon in recruitment, but he already answered my question because he said there are people out there who are wanting to join the force, so that's absolutely brilliant. And the last one was on efficiency savings, which is Deborah asked, and you've already handled. But I think it's a superb report, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Your comments been noted, Lee. Maronisa.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just say that first of all, the precept has been presented really powerfully by Paul Lodback and supported by Simon as well. And I absolutely don't underestimate the challenge in relation to policing around LLR, particularly around kind of the digital footprint that's coming on. And I absolutely support where policing is going towards neighbourhood policing, supported by both kind of the digital and intelligence aspects as well. I think the observation that I wanted to make was around funding, and Simon kind of alluded to this. Year on year, I think this is my 3rd year, as a panel, and I have supported the precept, absolutely, because it is really important that policing and effective policing is actually supported across LLR. The problem that I have is we are not getting to the crux of the problem, and this is that the allocation for LLR from the centre is not fair. Let's just face it. And I think Simon alluded to a particular authority where they're being centrally funded 81%. And so therefore, my question here is that if we keep on agreeing for citizens of LLR to fund policing, and if I look at even the report itself, the increase in terms of policing is coming from citizens while the centre is reducing its funding. I think my point is, when does this actually stop? Because given the current pandemic that's hit everyone really hard, it seems really, really quite unfair, to be honest. And is there anywhere, and I know, Lord Park, you made your representations as well to government around this, but there's got to be a point where we say, actually, stop, we need a fair allocation around LLR, because this is just very, very unfair. And I would really like to challenge them around how they are making this decision that on the one hand, somebody gets 81% and actually our allocation is really smaller than that, and our citizens actually fund what is actually a public service in a sense. So that was my observation.
Thank you very much, Nisha. Lord Bark, would you like to come back on that?
Well, thank you both very much, the last 2 speakers, for what you said. Lee, thank you very much for your kind comments about the report and how Paul Dawkins opened it. Thank you. As always, Nisha, you're absolutely on point. I'm going to ask Simon Cole to come in just for a moment with the chair's permission to comment on it. I mean, the times that Simon tells me, as though I don't know it, that the allocation that Leicester gets, LLR gets, the force gets, is unfair compared to others is absolutely, he's always telling me that. And also, it's quite clear what government is trying to do here, as you say. It's trying to get some of the glory, but at the same time, make the local people pay all the money. It's not satisfactory, and one day that has to stop. But the question, I think, for us who've got responsibilities here, Chief Constable mainly, in terms of operating a police force in an efficient way, and my job as well to back him and to tell him if he's doing it wrong, is we can't just say stop. We've got to somehow make sure Leicester LLR is properly policed, because if it isn't, the vulnerable will suffer and criminals will just get away with it. And that's not acceptable to anybody. And that's why I think you're right to make the general point you have, if I may say so. So with the chair's permission, I wonder if Simon would like to just make a comment on what you've said, Nisha.
Yeah, Simon.
Yeah, Chair, I'll try and be perhaps unnaturally brief. I mean, I think there are a number of things. I mean, I've alluded to it in what I've written in the papers. You know, there is a push towards local funding. And that means for policing as a whole, there's a real tricky issue. So the years of austerity, if you apply a 5% cut to the central grant, you've got forces in very varied positions. So Northumbria, over 80% centrally funded, lost 5% of 80%. Surrey, 50-50, lost 5% of 50%. So at the end of the period of austerity a couple of years ago, Surrey actually had the same number of police officers as they had at the start, whereas we were in the sort of 70%, so we lost 5% of 70%-ish, you know, and we lost kind of 20% of our people. So it makes it really complicated in terms of relativity. A point I would just sort of draw on, and you know, a couple of you commented about the sort of essentialness of what we do or what we don't do. And as I said earlier, in effect, extra capacity, extra hours of policing is what we're kind of talking about here, and how much we can put back into local communities. And even if this were to be agreed, and I'd be really clear, if this were to be agreed, you know, we're still down on what we had in 2010 in terms of available policing time. So, you know, that's a challenge, and we try and be as efficient as we can be. We are really, really efficient. We're very lean. All of our back office functions, if I can use that phrase, are amongst the leanest in the country. You know, so all of our buildings, our IT and everything in between. I put in the sidebar some of the ratios there just to sort of illustrate this point. And then just in terms of sort of other forces. So we're put into things called family groups for performance purposes. I mean, in our family group, we come out at about 180 officers per 100,000 of the population. We're in the same group with Kent, who have 203 officers. And I want to be really clear, I'm not critical of Kent, I'm not picking on them, or, you know, but they've got a considerably higher capacity. And yes, that is Kent, who we sent mutual aid to across the Christmas period because of EU exit. So there's a thing about relativity, and Nisha makes the point really powerfully, because in effect what is happening is that the funding of policing is being pushed locally. And the last point I'll try and make in an operational way, and not a political way, but the announcement of this budget just before Christmas, I got ever so excited because I read some of the headlines in the papers, which put us into double figure millions of growth. And I went in to say, Mr. Dawkins, and if we hadn't have been in a COVID time, I may have hugged him, but we're in a COVID time. So I stood askance from him. And he said, well, actually, we're not getting that much money. You're only getting that much money if the full flexibility of precept is applied. So I do think one of the things that also then happens is that the conversation about policing is kind of quite generalized rather than specific. So, you know, a number of local MPs announced that we were getting a double-figure growth. Well, you can all see from the papers that's totally reliant on yourself. And then the last point is just about relativity. Bit of feedback. Last point I promised is just relativity of available resourcing for us is linked into population size. You know, and the population has grown by 10% across a period where our budget has reduced, and we're deeply, deeply grateful in the last couple of years where the panel, and Nisha's made the point, you know, the panel has been asked to support over the last couple of years, and it has done so, and that has enabled us, as Lee alluded to recruit people into the force who we can then put out into local communities. So, you know, the relative funding issue, we can't solve set here today, but going forwards, I would suggest it does need solving, because what's happening is more of the cost of policing is being pushed to the local taxpayer compared to in many other force areas.
Thank you, Simon. Marilisa, could I ask you to take your hand down, please? Les, your general comment, please. Can't see Les. Oh, there he is. Yeah, mute Les.
It always helps, doesn't it, if you tell them. Really tough. I think I'd echo the comments that Councillor Taylor and Councillor Walters have commented, but I'd like to take a slightly different slant, if I may, Chair. So Paul Heinsohn and I regularly spar statistics with Paul, very regularly. What I have a problem with the report, the survey report, is the opening statement on the exec summary. It says a strong majority of LLR residents. It is not a strong majority. It may be a strong majority of the sample, but it is most definitely not a strong majority of, and I say that looking at my book up there that says quantitative methods for business decisions. So I tend to understand statistics. Anyway, that's a secondary point. I'm just uncomfortable with that opening phrase. And if that is a public document, it could be incredibly misleading to say a strong majority of LLR residents. But that's just one for the team of the OPCC to think and take back. I absolutely echo Lee Harper-Davies' comment. Paul, that was an excellently easy report to understand. My concern is the lateness of it, Lord Bark. I think dropping it on my inbox at 11 minutes past 3, I think, last Thursday, when I'm on training. I'm in meetings most evenings. I was in training on Friday, and I was looking after my bubble mother-in-law over the weekend. You know, a lot of us work. So I think inadvertently or advertently, we were put on the back foot. And if we are here to provide good scrutiny, then we should, Lord Bart, be given the time to scrutinise fully and fairly. A question I do have, picking up with Councillor Taylor, is the £500,000 efficiency savings. Chief has said that he's confident he can find 500k. Lord Bart, you've challenged the Chief to find 500k. So why isn't the 500k being used to acquire some of those extra officers? If that money is definitely there, why are we charging it all to the precept and not looking for recruitment through those £500,000 savings? That would then lead me to a question that says, was there any alternative modelling done, as in what can you collectively do with the fiver, collectively do with the tenner, collectively do with the 15? And I think the other irk for me, I think, Lord Bark, is this timing issue. I am a representative of my district authority as a member of this panel. I've had no time to sample what my colleagues think, what my peers think as to whether we should or should not support the £15 increase. So I am concerned about the lateness, and I trust hopefully, you know, we're all in weird times, that this doesn't happen again. I think backing Simon, we're all on the fairer funding campaign. We've been on it for many years, and I think we all get that point. But let's not misunderstand things. whether it's local tax or central tax, it's just the taxpayers that generate it. Whether it's charged locally or nationally, we still pay for it one way or another. So I think for me, Lord Bark, Simon, and Paul, it's the question about if those £500,000 efficiency savings are there, and Simon's confirmed he's confident he can find them, why is it not being used to recruit some of those extra officers rather than charge it to the precept? Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
Lord Mark.
Thank you very much, Les, for your comments, and thank you for the support that you show. You absolutely do, and your colleagues on the panel in regard to the fairer funding issue. As to the lateness, I can only apologise again. We were 2 days late. And without kind of breaking into what were obviously confidential discussions, you may be able to imagine that one of the reasons for that was that there was quite, and I think the word is used in Paul Dawkins's report, quite, I don't know quite what I can't find the passage at the moment, but there were discussions and disagreements around where the budget should actually end, not the £15, that was never disagreed with, but other issues around where the balance should lie between police numbers, between investments and other things that could be balanced. And it was those discussions that you would expect to be fairly sort of blunt and sensible between intelligent people that led us to not being able to send it out so that you got it instead of at 3 minutes past 11 on Thursday at 3 minutes past 11 on Tuesday, which when you should have had it. And I unreservedly apologise for that. But actually, that was now a week ago, 6 days ago, forgive me, 6 days ago. I think one of the things that also made that worse, from what I understand, is that the printed copy, and I'm someone who likes a printed copy myself, didn't arrive until Monday because of COVID and post office, and above all, I think the weather, which was, of course, decided to be very, very awkward and difficult at the start of this week. But I don't offer any excuses. I'm trying to explain why it was 2 days late. And I do understand your annoyance at that. So having said that, I think, and Paul Dawkins will come in quickly if I'm wrong, that your point about the 500,000 isn't a good point, because that would just have meant that the gap was larger, the funding gap was larger if we'd spent those on police officers as such. What you need to know is that that 500,000 will become reality in the course of the budget, and hopefully in the course of the next few months. And that's how I would respond to you. Am I right about that, Paul Dawkins, in terms of the point that the Councillor Les Phillimore makes around the 500,000 efficiencies?
With your agreement, Chair, just respond to that quickly. Yes, you are, Lord Bark. The 500,000 is included in the medium-term financial plan. So there is an assumption that overall expenditure will reduce by £500,000. That's already factored in. The only bit that's missing is where that £500,000 will come from, which links to the comments both myself and the Chief made around the development of the plan and the identification of those savings that's still to be completed.
Okay, can I come back?
Chair, before...
Thank you, Les. Sorry, I missed that.
I'm sorry, before Les does come back, just so the word I was searching for, Les, was robust. The discussions were robust. And I think you know what robust discussions are.
That was exactly the word I was going to give you, Lord.
Thank you.
Robust is good. I'm quite happy to withdraw the question or the proposition about the £500,000 efficiency, but I still think there's an issue there, that if there's £500,000 of efficiency savings that can be found, without even working out where they are or what they are, I'm still not convinced that we should not be looking for some of those to help support Simon recruit those extra officers. But that's, you know, a minor technical point. I understand what Lord B and Paul have said. but we have an unspecified saving, which may wind up being £750,000 because there's no meat on that particular bone. There's no specifics about where those savings will be. Simon's got his hand up, Chair.
Yeah, Simon, obviously on this issue.
Yeah, sorry. And one of the robust discussions, I think the PCC will forgive me for saying, was about this topic, because I personally wouldn't support having a £500,000 efficiency, because we try and be efficient in everything we do. And that's how we've created reserves in the past, which we've been spending gladly on across the last 10 years. You know, if we can do something cheaper tomorrow, we do it cheaper tomorrow, as long as cheaper isn't to the detriment of the public. So one of the robust discussions was, to use a technical phrase, what the bloody hell is all this about? So, you know, all the way through, if we can find efficiencies, we take those efficiencies and we reinvest them. And separately at the moment, I'm chairing a national process of strategic efficiency and reinvestment in one of the national functions, which has got £800 million in it. And that's the principle we've used there. It's the principle we use in force. So it's 0.25% of our budget that we're talking about. And actually what it means is we will codify and write down efficiencies that we've identified as we go along life's path that I think we would have identified anyway. And so, you know, Les, I absolutely understand the point you're making, but I mean, we've heard Kirk Master describe Mr. Dawkins as prudent. I've used some other words about him. I think we have a track record of being as lean, as efficient as we can be. And I think the tricky thing with the savings, and we will produce a plan and we will codify that, you know, if they're one-off savings, you can't really spend them on staff and all those. I mean, Les, you've run businesses, goodness me, you know this stuff better than I do. So just be reassured it'll be there. It doesn't mean we've got £500,000 sloshing around with no home. And there is just a thing, isn't there, that because we're in, I have a fellow chief who always says the problem with annual budgets is that the Navy don't build a ship by building half of it and then waiting to see if they've got money for the other half. And really, this is a sort of product of doing that. So please be assured, we are lean, we seek efficiencies all the time. If we can find a better way of doing things, we will do that. But we will absolutely, as I have been asked to by the PCC, and I'm accountable to him, we will produce a plan that describes where those efficiencies come from. I'd love to have had it here by today. It was just not feasible to do it with all the other things that were going on. You know, we had the budget letter 5 weeks ago. I mean, and just, you asked about modelling, and then I promise I'll shut up, Chair. So Les asked about modelling. Yes, we did model other ways of doing this. We looked at ways that we thought were more affordable. We looked at ways that, if anything, were less affordable and more risky, and they were part of some of the robust discussions as well. I mean, I think one of the challenges for policing is that the sort of the language of policing has become officer numbers, and one of the challenges is it's about the capability of the whole organisation to deal with everything, and some of the everythings aren't best delivered by officers. And I'm biased, I'm an officer. I think officers are great in general terms, but there are things that other people are better at doing. So how do we balance, frankly, a political need for numbers, which you can see played out locally and nationally, against the capability that keeps the people of Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland safe in a world where arguably they're more likely to be a victim of crime online than they are walking down the street? And how do we balance that out and balance the call for visibility as well? So there will be a piece of paper that describes where the £500,000 is coming from.
Thank you, Simon. And Chair, you know, good scrutiny is about asking questions and digging in. Yeah. And so thank you for that, Simon. Thank you, Lord B. And thank you, Paul, for your responses. Very helpful.
Thank you, Les. If you could take your hand down, please. Kevin, you've been waiting really patiently, but it's finally your turn. Then Michael.
Well, my questions go onto the paper.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that, Kevin. Sorry.
Right, my questions are I'm going onto the paperwork now.
Okay then. Cheers, Michael.
Now we'll wait until you start going through.
May as well have you now, and then we'll have Michael. Then we'll have a comfort break for 10 minutes.
All right, okay.
We've not been going 2 hours or less now.
Okay. So I'll just go to page 10.
10.
The beginning of the report, page 10. Item 47. It's about a third paragraph down, which talks about The estimated, I'll quote what it says so we know where we are. The estimated total cost of the 88 police officers 21-22 is the 2.6. It's fully funded by the Home Office grants, which we know, that's fine, but only if they are recruited in full. Is it realistic to get those officers in post by that time? And is there a threat to that process? I think that's important. And if you're going through the papers, I've got quite a few questions later on about the budget, if I may.
Okay.
There's a risk there that is there any mitigation that guarantees that that's going to happen? Thank you.
Yeah, Lord Mark, and then obviously on to Michael then.
Yeah, I will go straight to Paul Dawkins on this one. But as I understand, the condition of the government's uplift is that if a force doesn't meet the uplift numbers that the government say it will get, then it will lose out in financial terms. Paul, is that right?
Yes, that is right, Lord Bark, and we do expect to recruit all of those officers next year. I'm not sure, Chair, if the Chief was indicating he might want to say something around that as well.
No, the points were, I mean, just Chair, if I can, I mean, we're absolutely on course. We have to do a national return every month. Every week I get personally briefed by our regional liaison person against how we are with the programme, because it is one of those programmes, if we slip off, we don't get the full money. So we absolutely don't want to slip off. We're on course. I'm delighted to say we have way more applicants than we have jobs, and that's sustained for quite a while now. So as we are, we're on course. There's also a cascade of accountability, starting with a meeting chaired by the Home Secretary to make sure forces are on course. So the last report I had, which was a couple of weeks ago, we are green on every indicator, but Kevin's quite right to ask about it. The answer is yes, we are on course.
Is there a supplementary? Do you have a supplementary? Do you allow supplementaries, Chair? No? Sorry.
Carry on, Kevin.
Sorry, just very quickly. Thank you, Simon. Again, I appreciate the answer to that. And again, I might congratulate people on the reports anyway. I think they're very good.
Thank you.
The issue is quite simple, is that we've already established that there are a number of officers that are going to leave, retire, etc. We've then got to move forward with the 88. To avoid double counting, and when one leaves, you set one on, you then count that as part of the 88, because all you're doing is flopping like we like. Because the 88 is additional, not replacement of people who leave. Thank you very much.
Okay, any comment from Simon?
Yeah, Kevin's bang on the money with that. We absolutely do that. And I'm going to regret saying what I say now. Arguably, we're one of the better forces at doing that. We link money to budget really, really ruthlessly and to people strength. And so we're absolutely doing that. So we have a expected head count of people leaving. We have incoming. We have incoming we need to replace them. We have incoming we need for the additionality, whether that additionality is funded nationally or locally. So we're absolutely ruthless and rigorous around that.
Thank you. Michael.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree that we need to have increases in police numbers. As the figures show, we've seen a decline at the same time in police numbers at the same time as we've seen a population increase of about 10% in LLR, and therefore that has meant that obviously the number of police officers per resident has fallen significantly, and so there is a need for this increase in police officers. My concern is that the level of council tax rise at a time when a lot of people are struggling due to the COVID situation. A lot of people are seeing reduced incomes. We've got the 3 million excluded from various support schemes, many of whom will be living in Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. And therefore, people are going to be hit by large council tax bills. I've argued for some time about the situation in which Leicestershire is the worst funded county in the country, which means that in order to get anywhere near balancing the budget, the county council is going to have to increase the council tax significantly this year. And whilst the government has said that it's expanding the spending power of local government with the spending review, the Local Government Association's report into the government spending review has made it plain that over 80% of the increase in spending power will have to come through council tax on local residents. And therefore hitting people again with this council tax rise is going to mean a real struggle for a lot of people. Now, I note from your report that the Leicester Rutland police are in the same boat as Leicestershire County in terms of being unfairly funded by the government. In fact, your figures show that if we had the average funding, there would be 20 million extra available to the local police force. And so my sort of final comment really is to say that were Leicester and Rutland police to get the same level of funding as the national government, would that effectively remove the need for this council tax rise? I presume that it would, and that it's only happening because we haven't got the fair funding from the government.
Michael, thank you very much. I think you'd be surprised if I disagreed with much of what you'd said, to be honest. And of course, people have suffered a lot during the pandemic, both obviously in all kinds of ways, but financially too. Absolutely appreciate that. And I understand the position of the County Council very, very clearly, which is why my guess would be that the County Council will put up its budget by the maximum it can when the time comes, sometime later in March, in February. I suspect that will happen. No one does it with a light heart. It seems to me that we have a chance here of increasing the police numbers so that they are okay rather than brilliant. I think in the past few years they've been much too low from where you come and all across LLR, whether it be the city or the county. And this is an opportunity for us to increase them. And I point out, of course, as you know very well, you're county councillor and a district councillor, you know very well that the amount that ratepayers have to pay, council taxpayers have to pay, that's actually the police precept, is still a very small amount, comparative small amount, when compared to that in which the large local authorities rates are, if you follow what I mean. But don't think I do this with a light heart. I don't. I'd much rather not have to do this, but I do think it's in everyone's interests that Leicestershire is properly policed.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to suggest, it's 3:10 by my watch. We've been going 2 hours, 10 minutes. We just have 10 minutes off, and then we'll start again at 3:20. If I'm just not quite there at 3:20, be patient. I've just got to let 2 puppy dogs out for a quick exercise, and they're not quite good at coming back when you call them just at this moment in time, but I'll do my best to be back by 3:20. Okay, last time we had a long meeting like this, I went 3.5 hours a day without a break, and I got into all sorts of trouble afterwards for not allowing the comfort break, so that's where we are. Okay, see you all shortly.
Thank you, Chair.
Chair.
Yes?
I'm dealing with an homeless case just come through, so I might be a bit late back.
Okay, Paul, thank you very much for letting us know.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. God.
It hasn't moved for 5 minutes.
I know that.
Is he all right?
His throws. Other people are moving.
Mhm.
Are you reading text or? Yeah, I can see a little tiny bit of movement.
Can you?
Much needed cuppa.
Yes. Hi, Paul. We're just starting, I think. Paul? Paul just reading.
Can't beat a nice cup of tea.
Hi, Nita. What's attendance like at the moment?
Absolutely.
Cheers, Elaine.
Cheers to you, Lee. Cheers.
People are just coming back on. Others have still got their cameras muted, so they may be there. I'm sure they'll
Tell me when you're ready to start, please.
Yeah.
I didn't think you'd want to see me eating a carrot, Chair.
Sorry, Led.
I didn't think you'd want to see me eating a carrot.
Last time I did that, Les, I broke a tooth, split a tooth. It was in March, just after the lockdown had started. Bit into a carrot, a tooth split, £1,000. Yeah. So be warned. Eating healthy is not good on your pocket.
Says the farming type person.
Was it a golden carrot?
I think it should have been anyway. I don't know what it was, but it was £1,000. That was a Melton dentist, by the way. It wasn't my royal appointment.
Are you ready for me to resume the?
Yes, of course. I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All clear, Anita?
Yes.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, and thank you for bearing through the comfort break there. Time has just gone 20 past. We will come to we've had general comments, a lot of obviously other questions as well. So hopefully it may save time and economise in the section by section report. And that is exactly what we're going to do now. We're going to go down my old, well and tried, tested way, in my opinion, which is the best way, taking each headline it comes and ask for any questions on that. Like I said earlier, we've done quite a few of them already. So hopefully people get the opportunity to scrutinise and also to support the report as well. But even so, time does move on and time is limited. We've got 2 other papers after this one as well, but there's no more important paper than the budget. So I'm not over concerned how much time we spend on that. So moving on immediately, executive summary on page 2. Any further questions on that? Okay, thank you. Page 3, Leicester context, which includes the chart 1, chart 2, chart 3, chart 4, and yes, and chart 5. We have Kevin and then Michael. Kevin?
Well, sorry, what page are you on, Chairman? My papers are seeing different page numbers.
Okay, we started on page 3, the Leicestershire context, and then the 5 charts which take us up to page 6.
Oh, yeah, it's all right.
Have you any questions on there?
No, I'll put my hand down now.
Okay.
A bit further on.
Michael, was it an old hand? Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Page 6, grant settlement 21-22. Page 7, tax base collection fund details. Still on the same page, council tax referendum limit. If I'm going too quick and you want to pull me back, I have no problems with that, by the way. Still on page 7, risks. Page 8, base budget preparation, approach and scrutiny on page 8. Over to page 9, the revenue budget 2021-22. which takes us on to the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner on page 11. Page 12, commissioning. Page 13, investments. Page 14, proposed efficiency savings. We've had a number of questions on that already. Page still 14, capital strategy. Oh, sorry.
Got my hand up.
Debbie, yeah, over to you, Debbie.
I want to say thank you for Simon for his reassurance about the efficiency saving, because you know the detail that he's given at the meeting wasn't in the papers, so that's reassured me considerably with my question that I asked. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Debbie. Page 14, capital strategy, capital program, treasury management strategy. Still on page 14, medium-term financial plan. Flips over to page 16, the use of reserves and balances. Over to page 18, the precept proposal. Page 19, statement of the Chief Constable. Page 21, robustness of the budget, statement of the Commissioner's Chief Finance Officer. Page 22, implications, which takes us to the appendices. Any clarification needed on the Appendix 1? Any clarification?
Yes, Chair. Sorry, I couldn't raise my hand in time.
Oh, sorry, Alan. Fire away.
That's all right. Just to confirm, I agree also that central funding is the real problem. But Appendix 1, precept by billing authority. The problem we have with raising funds by precept rather than by central government is the disproportionate effect that it has on residents in some authorities over and above others, depending simply on the average value of the homes within that authority, and which has no bearing whatsoever on the needs of that authority for the intervention of the police or the Police and Crime Commissioner. So I support the view that central government needs to do more, the precept needs to be less, particularly for my residents. They pay more than they should, but need less.
Okay, thank you very much, Alan. Moving on to Appendix 2, any clarifications needed there? And any clarification needed on any point in Appendix 3? Okay, thank you very much. So,
yeah, my hand up if it's possible.
Oh,
please.
sorry. Yep, my fault. I've got Elaine's hand. And yeah, Deborah's first and then Elaine. Then Les was waving at me. So I presume Les wants to come in. Yeah.
Yeah, I've still got this with about the section 106, and I think it'd be helpful for us to come back if there is some blockages with the local planning authorities, with the police getting the money that developers have paid to them. I think that's something that we need to raise. So maybe there should be a report coming back to the Police and Crime panel about section 106, because I do think it should feature a lot more within the budget, and we should have an overview of that. So I'd be grateful for that to come back at some point in future, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, we'll put a report on for the next meeting, Deborah, on 106 collection.
Yeah, could I come in on what Deborah just said? I absolutely agree with her. I think it'd be a good subject for the panel to talk about. I also am quite sort of active in the area in which I live, around 106, and I think it's something we all, certainly I, ought to learn more about than I know at the present time, and I think it's very relevant to for the next few years.
Yeah, so report for the next meeting then, Willie. Thank you. Elaine.
Oh, thank you, Chair.
Chief's waving, Joe.
Sorry, Les.
Okay.
Said the Chief's waving desperately.
Oh, sorry, yes. Sorry.
Oh,
I'll wait for the chief then, because I'm not going to stand in the way of him. Should I just wait a minute?
Okay.
Go, chief.
Elaine, I should give way to you really. Just quickly on 106, I mean, absolutely, we can bring a paper. The longevity of some panel members may be tested by who twitches when I remind everybody. It once take out a judicial review around 106, which we lost, which was about the relative ability to raise revenue from a rather large development. And it was a great experience for me to be in a court in my tunic in front of a judge discussing 106. So Councillor Taylor, I think, was spared that particular experience. You can be assured that we give 106 lots and lots of attention, and it is one of the reasons I have grey hair.
I have to say it was the panel's best performance ever, in my opinion, following that hearing. Maybe Les, obviously you were involved with Levy at that time, I'm sure, so you will remember it well, although you weren't on the panel.
I was aware of it, Chair, but just slightly before my time, fortunately.
Same with, through you, Chair, same with me, just slightly before my time, Les, too.
Yeah. Well, Simon and I will remember it well, and yeah, it was an interesting time. Okay, sorry about that, Simon, I didn't see your wave. Elaine, back to you.
Yes, so just to say, it was before my time as well. I don't think I was born. I don't know. Anyway,
I'm trying to say Simon and I are old anyway.
Sorry about that, Chair. Just to say that I think the paper's really good, really clear, you know, and on the presentation of the paper in particular, I think has been really helpful. Your report, Simon, I think is great as well. I'm not saying that yours isn't, Lord Back, because it's really excellent. But the whole thing about policing and the complexities of it, I think, is something that we really must consider. And, you know, for the ward that I represent, obviously, is the ward of Esmonsal. And, you know, what we've seen as councillors is absolutely amazing. The policing that's going on there is crucial. And the trust that has been built up over the past few years with the public is absolutely necessary and important for local intelligence. And so for me, I really do support the precept. I know that it's high, and you know, we need to challenge the government as well on the way that they are kind of ignoring us, and we need more support from them. But thank you very much. I think it is an excellent report, and thank you for the work that the police do for us, for the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. Les?
Thank you, Chair. It's a kind of side question, but it is kind of within the budget, because page 27, capital strategy, refers to fleet. You don't need the paper, Simon, you'll be able to answer this one. And the question really is, you know, as local government authorities, we are all well aware of the requirement to reduce our carbon footprint and change our methodology. So I was just curious whether it's you, I presume it's you, Simon, because it's your team. Are there any ambitions towards the electric vehicles within the force? Some of them unnamed brand, but kind of American based, are pretty swift on acceleration.
Yeah, Les, thank you. I mean, I'll start, and then you'll be pleased to know that we have a green champion in force, and it's Mr. Dawkins. So he'll be looking forward to picking up. I mean, we do 8 million miles a year of patrol, you know, so this is big stuff, and we could make a real difference. I think, to be fair, to date, we've had very limited success with any trialing and looking at electric vehicles. They just don't have the ability to do the longevity of journey that we sometimes need. But Paul, do you just want to come in with your green champion head on?
Thanks, Chief, and through you, Chair. Yes, I mean, we are sort of actively looking at the electrification of fleet. There are one or two forces that have taken on several electric vehicles and have used them mainly in urban areas, which we could do as well, of course, in Leicester particularly. The blockages at the moment really are around affordability. So the cost of electric vehicles is somewhere between 1.5 to 2.5 times the cost of a normal fossil fueled police vehicle, and the infrastructure that's required as well to charge those electric vehicles comes at a further cost. So we are currently on the force side reviewing the vehicle fleet strategy. There's some work going on around that, and we can absolutely say that within the next sort of 5 years, you'll start to see electric vehicles come onto fleet. And for those that probably aren't aware, we have around 500 vehicles on the Leicestershire Police fleet. So clearly the replacement of those would take many years, and it does come down ultimately to affordability. So that's where we are, Chair. I'll hand back to you. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you very much. Paul. Paul?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Yes, I'd like to thank all the officers for the report. I think they're very detailed. Taking Michael's point, which I do share, I mean, any tax rise is very painful to all our residents we represent. I'm going back to the time when I sat on the old police authority, when we had to put the precept up to 15%. Gasp and horror at that time. But police numbers were cut to the bone. So, and the majority of people in a survey we carried out, a lot more than what we've had this afternoon, supported it because they wanted to see more police officers on the beat at local level. But it went through, to cut a long story short. So, but I do have concern, like all authorities, when you add like 5% Leicester's looking at the maximum that they will be adding on to their council tax on top of the fire, on top of the police. It does worry me to a certain extent, and I'll be saying this on my council. But having said that, judging by past, people want effective policing. I represent Beaumont Leys. There's a big drug problem, I'm sure, across all our wards. And I welcome Deborah's comment on section 106. It's a pain in the butt for me on my authority of where this money does go. So I know I'm only a sub on this, Chair, but I thought I'd share that experience with you. I welcome all the reports and thank Simon for his comments, and I'm sure I will be supporting the precept. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Paul, if I could just say, I also remember the 15% rise. I remember there were two forces really out of kilter. The other one was Lincolnshire. They were both, Leicestershire and Lincolnshire were both invited down to the Home Office, I remember, to present their case. Leicestershire got the okay to put it up to 15% and Lincolnshire didn't. And to this day, by the way, Leicestershire have benefited from that 15% rise. To this very day, we still benefit from that rise. Byron Rhodes was chair of the police authority at the time, and he was the one who made a presentation to the Home Office. Just a little bit of history there for you all. But Simon does remember it, obviously. It's just about by the time you came in, wasn't it, Simon? Yeah.
It was a little before, actually, Chair, but I suppose that if it hadn't been in place, then austerity would have been even more impactful than it was.
Yeah. Just point out, this was before the coalition came into power as well. Just point that one out. Alan.
I think Gladstone proposed it, didn't he?
Probably. Don't tell Byron. Alan.
I thought it was Charles I.
Oh, you know what happened to him. Alan.
Thank you, Chairman, and forgive me, but I think we're drawing to a conclusion, so perhaps an overall comment, if you don't mind. I remain mandated not to approve this. I can see that it most likely will be. What I would ask is a meeting with Simon. I know Simon is always willing to meet to look to a way to reassure residents in Rutland that they're getting good value.
Yeah, Chair, if I may, very happy to do that. I mean, I met with Rutland councillors about November time, I think it was, and we had a good discussion. Was it November, Alan? Yeah, I'm very happy to do that. I'm sure the PCC would like to be involved as well.
Yes, please.
Thank you very much, Simon. I have Kevin next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Again, I have to say that everything that's been said has been quite succinct, and trying to justify the £15, I can understand people's comments, etc., and what's coming from the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner. But putting my other hat on, it's quite difficult to try and levy more cost to the residents. That with my other hat, delivering emergency food parcels, operating a food bank and more people attending it, taking food parcels to schools because people have lost their jobs, etc. It's very difficult then to say everything that's been said is right, proper. We want to see more police. We want to support it 110%, and I do that. But my conscience keeps telling me that seeing those people, real people who are suffering badly, to levy just £15, there's got a fire service to go on that, you've got a local districts to go on that as well. Can I justify saying yes? Let's burden them with more costs, which we all argue that. Well, we put in our budget to say the collection rate is going to be 98.4. Are you going to get 98.4 in the collection rate under these times? So therefore, you might be down to 90. So the income from that precept may be lower than what you anticipate. I do find it difficult. I want to support the police. I want to support them 110%. But coming back to, if I may, bear with me, Chairman, if you think of what we've supported thus far, back in 1920, £24 increase, which gave 107 police officers, brilliant, no problem. Then moving on, £10 increase, which again further 100 police officers and 20 PCSOs. The government come in and say, well, we'll give you some money for 88 police officers. That gives you then a total of 207 extra police officers in that period. I'm just thinking ahead, is that realistic to get them all in place? Because you could have some rollover. I'd imagine you'll have rollover of people. You can't interview all those people at the same time because of the time factors. So some of that will be rolled over to the next year, some will go to the next year. I just share this with you that the 50 that you want to put in, that may be rolled over to the following year. So therefore, do you really need the 15? Because that could be levied for the following year. So the impact to this year would not be as much on those people. I'm reluctant to support it, but I want to. But having seen it firsthand and going out and delivering food parcels to families, putting food on the table for kiddies and so on, could we justify putting that up to that grade and put that burden onto those families? It's my conscience at the moment is telling me that we've got to do something for them other than keep levying the costs. I know that it's 58% now of core and 42% for being passed down to local taxpayers. What's going to happen next year? It's going to be put more on to the taxpayer, local taxpayer, and the year after that. I'm fighting at the moment as to the best way forward. Obviously, the best way forward is to put these police on the beat and get them sorted out. And the pay freeze doesn't help, does it? It's penalising those people, frontline services who are doing a sterling job for us, putting themselves at risk, and then say, "Oh, you're not worth it," like the nurses and everybody else. Which it really is crass of a central government who live in a cloud cuckoo land for me. They don't live in the real world, and they don't get out enough to see how people are living and the problems that they're associated with what's happening today. I'll leave that with you, but I think that the burden for the local taxpayer is quite significant. Can we just have an answer about the numbers that I've given? Is it realistic to get those all in place? And we can't carry things forward that might reduce the council tax this time and then may reduce it again next year, but levy to get the total result eventually by the end of the next financial year. I'll leave that. Sorry to move for a little bit, but I think it's important.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Lord Mark, any comments?
Well, I think it was a very important contribution that Kevin made, and he won't be surprised, I don't think, that I absolutely understand completely what he's saying. And I know that a lot of his constituents in the ward that he represents will be suffering, absolutely. They won't all be Band D, some will be lower, some will be higher, some will be Band D. And he's right. People are living in great difficulty at the moment for a number of reasons. I accept that. I will ask Paul Dawkins to come in and and perhaps the Chief, just to emphasise the fact that last year's are already been settled, already in place, will be in place by the 31st of March. Absolutely. My case, Kevin, is this: the police precept, even with this increase, is a small part of the total precept that your constituents will have to pay. Some of your constituents will have to pay. Still a small part compared to the county councils and maybe even Oadby and Wigston's as well. And the good that it will do is what we tried to persuade the panel of this afternoon, in terms of getting our police force back to strength, dealing with the problems, and they aren't just problems of crime, they are protecting the kind of people you're talking about, your constituents, from being made vulnerable, from being the victims of crime, to know that the police are there and thereabouts in order to help them when they need help. And I think we're so close now to getting back to a reasonable number of police officers for our area. We're still way behind, but we're getting closer to it. And it'd be a mistake not to push this in order to try and get those numbers up. Their job, after all, is to protect your constituents, make sure they're secure and not the victims of crime. And that's why I'm putting forward a £15 increase, not because I'm unaware of what people are going through. I think I am aware of that, but that it just needs to be done. And this is still a comparatively small part of the extra precept that they're going to have to pay. Chief, Simon, Paul, is there anything you'd like to just clarify in terms of numbers and answer what Kevin has so ably said? Chief, through Joe, through the chair.
Yeah, I mean, Paul Dawkins might want to come in, Chair. I mean, firstly, Kevin, I kind of recognise everything that you've just said, you know, and reassure you perhaps that has formed part of the discussion that we've been having with the PCC and his team. I think the point you were making is around how do you sort of stack recruiting, so almost how do you moderate it in year one and then build on it in year two, and that's exactly the kind of thing when Les asked around modelling which we've been trying to look at and understand, and the challenge is that of course we don't know what next year's funding looks like, and so it makes it hard to kind of predict against that. And the second point probably doesn't help at all with your kind of empathizing, but as in the comment bar earlier somebody said, you know, it seems that the funding's being sort of taken away from the areas with the greatest sort of socioeconomic needs, and sadly all the things that you described tend to be generators of police business, and so, you know, we know that when socioeconomic conditions decline that the police tend to get busier. So it's a bit of a kind of Gordian knot, which I can't help untie, but the points you make are absolutely not lost on us. And I hope you have noticed that our neighbourhood teams have been trying to support, you know, with their own volunteering, their own support for food banks and the like across the past few months, and try and being part of local communities dealing with particularly the pandemic.
Okay, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think there's anything further for me to add to what Lord Barker and the Chief have said. I think they've dealt with all of the points, unless there are any subsidiary questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Paul. Moving on, Keith.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to everybody who contributed to this, because yet again it's clear and very clear. I mean, I was pleased that having, we had much of this debate and heart searching last year, and as we've just heard through Kevin, this year obviously issues are more acute, and that's a real factor. But as the Chief wrote, the budget can make a significant and positive operational difference. That's the key thing. Obviously, Lord Barker is holding him to account, and this, whether it will be, who's got a crystal ball, but it should be his last budget. And I think, offering this precept, the consistent thread while I've been on this group has been of those 5 V's. I think this supports the visibility, increasing the number of officers, which we want. And I do think, looking at this, scrutinising it, it does also maintain that value for money. So although these are difficult times, and I don't think any of us want to increase the precept, I think it is value for money. It does increase visibility. So I do think, as an independent member, one should, I'll feel obliged to support Lord Barker and through him, the work of our officers. And many thanks to for all they do, especially in these difficult times. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Keith. What comments have been noted. Paul, do you want to come in again? Or is your hand up from before?
Yeah, no. I just want to say is I share everybody's views, and it's been a very robust scrutiny, which is welcome. But I had a budget the other night on housing where I'm chair. 60% of claimants were claiming benefits, which a lot of this will be paid back by the government. That's not a reassurance, whether that's right or wrong, but a lot will be paid by the government of this tax rise. I thought I'd just add that, Chair.
Thank you very much. Comment noted again. Les, do you want to come in again, or is it an old hand? You want to come in?
If I may, Chair, because
of course.
As uncomfortable as I am with it, because it's pounds, shillings and pence, at the end of the day, I am minded to support this, but I'd like to clarify why. I think there's a number of issues. Fairer funding, we know. We're all very conscious of fairer funding. We as county councillors and district authorities, we've been banging on this for a very long time, and I'm sure we will continue to bang that drum. So there is a fundamental challenge to us, but I'm not here to play politics with tax powers. Tax income, whether it's local government or national government, comes from us as taxpayers. That's the end of it. So somehow we have to pay for the services that we require and we want and we aspire to. That's just a fact of life. But I think there's 2 bits that I think that are really most important to me. One is, what does no disrespect, Lord B, but the Chief carries the biggest budget. What does the Chief's funding envelope look like moving forward? COVID is going to cost, end of. No, society is reasonably smart. COVID is going to cost, and we're going to pay for it. Somehow, one way or another, we are going to have to pay for COVID. And that is exactly the right thing to do. It's a global pandemic. So I think there is very much an argument that we do ensure that the Chief and his team are in the best possible position, without knowing what the future funding mechanism looks like. But the opposite side of that coin, Chief, is moving forward. If we give you all this extra money, then we will of course be looking for what performance improvements and standards and everything else that you deliver with that extra money. But I think that is the fair equation. If we support your extra cash, you give us something in return. So that's my observations, Chair. I think it's been a really constructive, interesting scrutiny of the budget in difficult and complicated times. And irrespective of political viewpoints, I think everybody's got valid points. But our job is to ensure, I guess, to some degree, that our police force is well funded, or as best funded as we can justify. And at the moment, I say I'm minded at this moment to support the proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Les. Lord Bark, any comments, or shall we just note? Because obviously Les made good points there, no doubt about that.
Absolutely. No, I agree, and he's right to point out, no disrespect at all taken, because although I am the budget holder, absolutely that's what the Act says. As we were reminded, 97.3% of this total goes to the Chief for him to use on operations and salaries.
Thank you very much. Alan?
Thank you, Chair. Very quickly, I know people meant well when they talked about council tax support and benefits. It was all a little bit too glib for me. An awful lot of people are just above that threshold, get no help at all. Also, many people are very proud and they don't ask for help until they fall off the cliff. So just a little bit of caution in what's being said about that, please.
Okay, comments noted there, Alan. Deborah?
Yeah, just the last comment from me. I just have to echo what Les has said. You know, this is a really difficult decision. None of us are sitting here agreeing to raise this up, but I think at the end of the day, we've got to support the police force, and I will be supporting it, but it's with a very heavy heart.
Thank you very much, Deborah. I don't believe there's any other questioners at all, to be honest, at this moment in time. So it may be time to close the debate down, and maybe I'm one of the few who hasn't, oh dear, nearly knocked over the furniture polisher. One of the few who hasn't spoken at all on this one at all. I do come from a background of encouraging low tax rise. My history, especially at Melton Borough, has been along those lines, and I'm very proud of what I achieved as well some time ago though. But times have changed. I do represent Melton Borough Council on this panel. Melton Borough Council, I'm often told by Byron, Melton is the largest district in Leicestershire, but by far the fewest people. Because of that, I am told consistently by people from down in Bottisford, where the Chief has made an appearance or two down in Bottisford. It's a long way off, right in the top right-hand corner of Leicestershire, right over to places like Cold Overton, Nossington, out to Gadsby, just a massive area. They never see a policeman. I take that slightly with a pinch of salt, because I live in Old Alby, as some of you know, and I do see the police. Maybe it's because I walk a lot, but they are around. But policing is a massive issue, as Alan will concur, in the rural areas. No doubt about it. Rural crime is rife. People don't feel safe. Only yesterday I had a couple of emails about policing issues. For that reason, I can understand the rise that Lord Bark is proposing, the wish to get back to numbers at least similar to 2010. So for those reasons, to be honest, if I went against these recommendations, I think people in Melton Mowbray would be most unhappy with me personally. So for that reason, I am going to move the recommendations on page 1, page 3, the A, B, C, D, and E. As always, when it comes to budget meetings, I do ask for a seconder. So I look for a seconder. And I'm going to take the first one and see. Elaine has put her hand up. So we go to the vote. It's important that we're all accountable to this. So I'm going to have, it's going to be a name vote really at the end of the day, because it's all on YouTube or wherever it is. So effectively, how do you want to play it, Anita? Do you want to go around each member in turn, ask whether they're for or against the recommendations I've proposed?
Actually, Kamal was going to sort of do a roll call, if that's okay with you, Chair.
Yeah, that's, well, exactly the same, except Kamal's going to do it rather than you. So, yeah. Kamal, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, there are there's a slight difference between a roll call, which I'm certainly going to do, and a recorded vote. I can read out the names of all 15 members who are indeed present, and I will ask each of them to say whether they are for, against, or abstain. There is power within our rules of procedure for any 3 members to ask to go one step further and for this to be a recorded vote, and members sometimes do that when they want to go on record as having in the minutes having shown that they voted one way or another. But I'll leave that to members to decide if they want to do that. I mean, you have made the point, Chair, that this is live cast, so in effect, by doing a roll call, we attribute each vote to the relevant member anyway, so we probably achieve that effect anyway. Do you want me to say what the rules are around approval and veto of the precept just for completeness, or shall I just move to the roll call?
No, for completeness and thoroughness, I think you should go through.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is one of the matters, the precept, which is within the decision-making powers of the Police and Crime Panel, and our Constitution reflects the legal provisions which give you 3 options in voting on the matter, as has been moved. You can either support the precept without qualification or comment, you can support the precept and make recommendations, or you can veto the proposed precept. To veto the proposed precept, it would require a 2/3 majority of all members. So there would need to be 10 or more votes to veto the budget. As it doesn't look like we're going in that direction, I won't go on to describe what would happen after a veto. But if we do reach the point where you veto through your vote in a moment, I will explain what happens next after that. There is, I mean, those of you who've listened to those 3 options will have deduced that there is in fact a 4th unstated option, which is to reject by simple majority. But the legal effect of that wouldn't be to prevent the Police and Crime Commissioner from issuing the budget the precept as proposed anyway. So it's to support without qualification or comment, support with recommendations, or veto. Shall I proceed to call out the names, Chair?
With the comments and recommendations, we have the vote first, and then we decide whether, if it is a vote for the recommendation, we then decide a comment or recommendations after that.
I think that would be sensible, Chair, yes.
Okay, so we go to the vote on for or against the recommendations. Over to you, Kamal.
Kamal, there's a request for Nisha to go first.
Say again, didn't quite catch that.
There's a request in the chat for Nisha to go first because she has to leave.
I see. Yes. Okay. Let me do that. Thank you. Just bear with me. I'll get my list so I don't miss anybody. Yep. So that's Marinisha Lalani.
Yes. Yeah, I am for, so I support the precept.
Thank you.
Apologies, I've got to leave.
Councillor Alan Walters.
Against.
Councillor Andrew Woodman. For. Councillor Elaine Pantling.
For.
Councillor Kevin Lloydell.
Abstain.
Councillor Lee Harper-Davies.
For.
Councillor Les Phillimore.
Heavy heart for.
Councillor Manjit Kaur Saini.
For. I'm for it, thank you.
Councillor Michael Mullaney.
Abstain.
Councillor Sharman Rahman.
For.
Councillor Deborah Taylor.
For.
Councillor Simon Wellband.
Against.
Councillor Keith Culverwell.
I'm not a councillor, but I'm for.
Apologies.
Independent.
Apologies. Was that a 4?
Yes, 4.
Thank you. Councillor Westley.
Oh.
And Chair, Councillor Orson.
4.
Have I missed anybody? No, I have 15. I have 15. I have 15 votes cast. That's 2 against, 2 abstentions, and I make that 11-4. So that's carried, Chair.
Thank you very much. I suspect strongly, Kamal, members would like to make recommendations to Lord Berk following this vote, or at least comment. How do you suggest we handle that?
Well, I think we just need to take views from amongst members as to what kind of distilled recommendation they would or comment they would wish to make on the back of that vote, Chair.
We've got a pretty good summary of the meeting. Having said that,
yeah, we could forward the minute extract to the Police and Crime Commissioner, to Lord Berk, by way of encapsulating those comments.
That's what I was thinking myself. We've got Les with a hand up, and I think Kevin put a proper hand up. No, not Les, and then first of all.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So my requests would be broadly what we've said. One is we have a report when ready on what those efficiency savings that Simon's been charged with look like, and B, having now approved the uplifting precept for the OPCC and the force, and I noticed Simon was nodding when I mentioned it, the areas that Simon perceives or expects that we will see the performance uplifts and the return on our investment effectively. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Kevin.
Yes, thank you, Chair. All I've got to say is that if we can keep a close eye on the recruitment process and have reports in the future to see how far we got with that, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, members are going to suggest that Kamal, Anita and I, and with Elaine's help as well, to put that letter together, and then we'll send it off to Lord Berk's office. How many days do we have to do that, Kamal? You're on mute, Kamal.
Thank you. Sorry, Chair. Our deadline for responding to the proposals is set out. In fact, it says 8th of February. So
8th of February. So
yeah,
we have to have something to the office by the 8th of February.
Yes, Chair.
And then that goes on the OPCC's website and also the Police and Crime Panel website on the City Council. Yeah.
Yes, Chair.
Members, I look to you. Is that satisfactory? We've noted Les's comments just then, and also Kevin's. Yeah. Okay. I can't see everyone on my screen, but no.
Yeah.
Well, Deborah's got a hand up. Yeah.
I think we should just put in there the feeling of the panel that we realise that people out there are struggling, and this is a really hard decision for us. You know, it's not in easy times. I understand we need to support the police, but it's a really tough decision, and we just need to recognise that we did it with a very heavy heart, and there's people out there struggling. I just like that added in. Thank you, Chair.
No problem. That will be the first line, Deborah. I don't see any other questioners at all. So is that okay, everyone? Just say yay or nay. Yep, I think so. Okay, thank you very much. Well, that paper is over with.
Chair, could I indulge you for just literally one sentence? That's to thank the panel for their scrutiny and, of course, for their decision. Very grateful. Thank you on behalf of both the police and the OPCC.
Yeah, and also thank you to Lord Berk, your office, getting the papers ready, and the Chief for his input too. It has been difficult, but I think everyone agrees that it's been a thoroughly scrutinised and, as it turned out, supported. I think we've done our job well, and it has been a tough decision, but yeah. Anyway, moving on. Item 5, the annual report of complaints received against the LLR Police and Crime Commissioner. Kamal, back to you to present the report.
Thank you.
Chair, sorry. May I be excused, Chair? I don't think I can offer an operational view into the complaints made about the Police and Crime Commissioner, however much I'd like to. So I think it would be appropriate if I stepped out at this point, if that's okay with you.
You're excused, Simon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And can I just echo what the PCC said in terms of thank you for your support and thank you for the proper discussion that we've just had.
Thank you.
Yeah, if it's suitable for the chief to pull out, I think given that I'm the subject matter of the next item on the agenda, it's probably even more proper for me to pull out.
Okay, not a problem at all, Lord Bart. Okay, come on, back to you.
Yeah, I don't propose to say a great deal. It's a brief report. That doesn't mean it's not an important report. That simply reflects the nature of the work that comes my way as the monitoring officer for this panel. It's a constitutional requirement that there is a published procedure for making complaints against the Police and Crime Commissioner. And we fulfill that function through processes that I look after on your behalf. Those require complaints to be made to me and give me a filtering role in initially deciding whether those complaints have any merit whatsoever. If they are complaints that allege criminal misconduct, I'm obliged to forward those to the IOPC. And if they are matters that are meritorious in any other regard, then I'm obliged to consult with the panel, initially through you, Chair, to decide what method of informal resolution ought to be attached to dealing with those complaints. What has happened in the year that I've reported upon is that the 5 complaints that I have received haven't even met that initial threshold. Well, one of them alleged criminal activity, and I referred it to the IOPC as I stated in my report, and there was no substance to it and was therefore dismissed by the IOPC and by me. And the other 4 fell into the category of really having no substance whatsoever. What I tend to find, and I think this is what my predecessor found as well, is that when a member of the public is disgruntled with operational policing that they've witnessed or been subjected to, they complain through the police channels, which are, as I'm sure every member knows, very sophisticated. They have an entire police, the PSD department, professional standards department, that have their own sophisticated arrangements for looking into operational policing complaints with appeal rights, which do involve the OPCC, but also the IOPC. What happens is that when people get disgruntled with operational policing, they sometimes couple that with a complaint to me as the monitoring officer, with a complaint about the Police and Crime Commissioner himself as being collusive in unfair policing. And that tends to be the nature of the kinds of complaints I get. They tend to be very non-specific, therefore very vague and broad, and one couldn't possibly even begin to allege any wrongdoing or establish any wrongdoing on the part of the Police and Crime Commissioner. But obviously I do look at each complaint on its own merits, and I'm always alive to dealing proportionately with those complaints that come in. But as far as the last year is concerned, I've set out in my brief report the nature of those complaints. None of them merited being taken any further.
Okay, thank you very much, Kamal. Any questions for Kamal? It's fairly straightforward. Okay, so note report. I think so.
Chair.
Thank you very much. Item 6, Anita, are you going to take us through this?
Yeah, it's really just for noting. It's just following on from the last meeting. Obviously, you received a report at that point, and I agreed to keep you up to date with the work programme. So this is, it's a live document. It will be updated as and when we add additional items. But currently, as it stands, it's showing you the timetable of the meetings, the work that we've already asked to be brought forward, and where that currently stands. There are a couple of items there which still need to be scheduled, but we've got the whole year ahead of us to do that. So it's really just a point of noting that, unless anyone has any particular items other than what you've mentioned today, such as the Section 106 report, if you have any other items you want to be considered for inclusion, then please let me know, either by way of email or through this meeting.
Okay, any comments? There's plenty of time, like I say, if you want to add to it. No hands are up. Okay, well, thank you very, very much, Anita. I know you put a lot of work into that and it's much appreciated. So thank you. Now we move on to date of next meeting. Obviously, with the precept being voted through, I take it the next meeting will be Thursday, the 25th of March. Am I right on that, Anita?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so 25th of March is the date of the next meeting. Again, members, thank you very, very much. You've all been stars on this. You really have given that report a really good going over, really thorough. It is, as Debbie and many others have said, it is with a heavy heart. Like I say, my background is a traditional Tory, I suppose, no tax. But on this occasion, if we want more policing, if we want better policing, like I say, not a lot of choice really. So, but well done to all of you. Kamal, thank you very much. Thank you massively, Anita, for all your input. And don't suppose any of us will see each other before the 25th of March other than on the camera. But anyway, take care, all of you, and we'll see you next time. Cheers then.
Thank you,
Bye.
Chair.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks, bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.